Tonight, we're diving into the complete history of the Regi Pokémon. There are a few important threads to follow, but I'll keep the pacing soft so you can still drift off comfortably. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Imagine, if you will, a world that is still cooling. A world where the very foundations of the earth are being pulled and stretched into the shapes we recognize today. In this ancient era, long before the first cities were built, or the first Pokeballs were fashioned from apricorns, there was a silence that covered the land. It was a silence not of emptiness, but of anticipation. And in that silence, there were giants. We call them the legendary titans, or more simply, the Regice. They are creatures not of flesh and blood, but of the very elements that compose our reality. They are the living embodiment of the Stone Age, the Ice Age, the Iron Age, and the mysterious energies that govern electricity and the ancient power of dragons. But to truly understand where they came from, we have to look toward the one who brought them into existence. We have to look toward the master of the giants, the Colossus that moved the world. The story of these titans has been shrouded in mystery, hidden behind heavy stone doors, and encoded in a language of dots and patterns that we now know as Braille. Why were they sealed away? Was it because they were monsters to be feared, or were they guardians meant to be protected from a world that wasn't ready for their power? As we begin this journey tonight, I want you to feel the weight of that history. Think of the cold, damp walls of the sealed chamber, hidden deep beneath the waves of the Hoenn region. Think of the biting wind that sweeps across the Snowpoint Temple in the far north of Sinnoh. These are places where time seems to stand still, where the air is thick with the memory of a time when giants walked the earth. The Regice are unique among legendary Pokémon because they represent a bridge between the natural world and the world of human artifice. When you look at Regirock, you see the rugged, unyielding spirit of the earth. When you look at Registeel, you see the eternal stillness of the glaciers, formed from ice that has never known the warmth of the sun. Registeel represents the dawn of industry, a body made of a metal harder than any found on our planet, perhaps forged from the remnants of meteors that fell from the sky in the distant past. And then there are the newer discoveries, the titans of the Galar region, Regieleki, a being of pure, restless energy, and Regidrago, a creature fashioned from the very essence of dragonkind, even if its form remains tragically incomplete. But the heart of this mystery lies in the contradiction of their origins. If you travel to the Sinnoh region and listen to the old myths told near the hearths of Celestic Town, you will hear of a divine creation. They say that after the great creator, Arceus, shaped the universe, it sent Regigigas as an emissary to tame the wild, chaotic world. They say Regigigas used its immense strength to pull the continents into place, binding them with ropes, and shifting the tectonic plates to create the land masses we inhabit today. In this version of the story, the Regice are the children of a god, forged from the raw materials of a new world to serve as protectors and symbols of the ages of man. Yet, if you cross the sea to the Hoenn region, the story changes. There, the myths don't speak of gods or divine emissaries. They speak of humans. They speak of ancient alchemists and master smiths who served a legendary king. In these stories, the Regice were not born of divine will, but were constructed as ultimate weapons of war. They were the iron fist of a kingdom that sought to dominate the land, and it was only after the king was long gone that the people realized the terrible power they had unleashed. Fearing the destruction these giants could cause, the ancient people worked together to seal them away, locking them behind puzzles and codes that only the most dedicated and wise could ever hope to solve. Which of these stories is true? Perhaps both are, or perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle, buried under layers of dust and forgotten lore. Tonight, we are going to peel back those layers. We are going to explore the silent halls of the desert ruins, the frozen depths of the ice caves, and the metallic echoes of the ancient tombs. We will examine the strange relationship between Regigigas and the creator of all things, looking into the whispers of a rebellion that almost tore the world apart. We will discuss the tragedy of a master who was cursed with a slow start, a titan whose power was so immense that it had to be dampened by time itself, just so the world could survive its awakening. As we move through this history, I want you to consider the significance of the number 6. 6 titans, each representing a different facet of our history and our planet's composition. They are the anchors of our world, standing watch in their eternal slumber, waiting for a trainer with the heart and the mind to wake them. The journey ahead is a long one, spanning across 3 different regions and thousands of years of human and Pokémon history. We will look at the mechanics of how they were captured, the symbolism of the Braille messages left behind by the ancients, and the terrifying implications of what happens when these 6 powers are brought together in one place. So let the world outside fade away. Let the sounds of the modern day disappear, replaced by the low hum of ancient machinery and the grinding of stone against stone. We are going back to the beginning, to the time of the giants, to the era when the world was shaped by the hands of Regice and its children. We are uncovering the secrets of the rock, the ice, the steel, the lightning, and the dragon. This is the complete, unabridged history of the legendary titans. It is a story of power, of fear, of creation, and ultimately, of a silence that has lasted for 10,000 years. Let us step into the darkness of the sealed chamber together and see what secrets the dots on the walls have been waiting to tell us. The air in these ancient places is always different. It feels older, heavier, as if the oxygen itself has been trapped there since the beginning of time. When you walk into the Snowpoint Temple, the first thing you notice is the cold, but it isn't a normal cold. It's a deep spiritual chill that seems to emanate from the very floorboards. Down in the lowest level, behind doors that require the presence of the 3 original titans to open, sits Regice. It is a massive figure, adorned with moss and gemstones, looking more like a statue than a living creature. But there is a heartbeat there, slow and steady, like the shifting of the Earth's crust. It is waiting. The Regice are not like other legendary Pokémon. They don't fly through the skies like Hoenn or Lugia, nor do they hide in the shadows like Darkrai. They are stationary. They are fixed points in the geography of the world. They are the landmarks of our history. To find them, you have to prove your worth, not just through battle, but through understanding. You have to learn the language of the blind, the Braille that was used to seal them away. This choice of language by the developers was no accident. It forces the player to slow down, to touch the world, to interact with the environment in a way that goes beyond simple combat. It is an invitation to listen to the silence, and in that silence, we find the echoes of the Stone Age. Regirock, a creature made of stones from all over the world. If a piece of its body breaks off in battle, it simply finds a new rock and attaches it, meaning its body is a constantly shifting mosaic of the planet's history. Then there is Regice, made of ice from the Antarctic, so cold that it cannot be melted even by magma. It represents the time when the world was gripped by frost, a reminder of the fragility of life in the face of nature's extremes. Registeel, the most mysterious of the original 3, with a body that isn't quite metal and isn't quite stone, a material that scientists believe came from another world entirely. As we move into the later eras, the discovery of Regieleki and Regidrago in the Crown Tundra. These 2 represent a different kind of power. Regieleki is the sheer speed and potential of the modern age, a being so energetic that it had to be fitted with special equipment just to keep its power from destroying itself. Regidrago, on the other hand, is a look back at the primal, raw energy of the dragons that once ruled the world, a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations are built on the bones of the ancient and the wild. But why did Regice make them in its own image? Why give them those strange, glowing eyes arranged in patterns? Some say the patterns are a code, a way for the Titans to communicate with each other across the vast distances that separate them. Others believe the eyes are sensors, allowing them to see the world not as it, but as a series of energy flows and tectonic shifts. Whatever the case, the sight of those glowing dots in a dark chamber is one of the most iconic and haunting images in all of Pokémon lore. Tonight, we will explore the theories that connect these giants to the very creation of the Pokémon universe. We will look at the possibility that Regice was not just a servant of Arceus, but a rival, a titan who believed it could create a better world, a world of order and structure, only to be cast down and sealed away for its hubris. We will look at the tragic nature of its ability, Slow Start, and how it represents the immense effort it takes for a being of such scale to interact with our much smaller, faster world. This is a journey through the foundations of the Earth and the heights of human imagination. It is a story of how we try to make sense of the vast, uncaring forces of nature by giving them names and faces. The Regice are our way of understanding the stone, the ice, and the metal. They are the guardians of our past and the watchers of our future. So take a deep breath, settle into your blankets, and let the history of the giants wash over you. We are going deep into the lore, past the games, past the anime, and into the very heart of the myth. The doors are opening, the puzzles are being solved, and the giants are finally beginning to stir. Think about the sheer scale of what it means to pull a continent. The force required to move land masses across the ocean is incomprehensible. When Regigigas was at the height of its power, it was a force of nature, unlike anything else. It didn't just live in the world, it shaped it. Every mountain range, every valley, every coastline bears the invisible fingerprints of the Master Titan. And yet, after all that work, it was relegated to a basement in a snowy temple, left to gather moss, while the world it built moved on without it. There is a profound loneliness in the story of the Regice. They are survivors of an era that no longer exists, relics of a time when the world was a much harsher and more elemental place. As we go through each chapter of their history, we will see how the different regions of the Pokémon world have interpreted these beings. We will see how the Galar region's perspective differs from that of Hoenn or Sinnoh. We will look at the unique items associated with them, like the Light Pillar and the Dragon Orb, and what they tell us about the materials Regigigas used in its final acts of creation. We will also touch upon the fan theories that have kept this community engaged for decades, from the idea that the Regice represent the different types of disasters that can befall humanity, to the theory that they are the keys to a much larger, even more ancient secret that has yet to be revealed. But for now, let us just appreciate the mystery. Let us appreciate the fact that in a world full of vibrant, colorful creatures, there are still these stoic, silent giants waiting in the dark. They are the reminders that the world is much older than we are, and that there are powers far beyond our control. As you drift closer to sleep, let the image of the 6 Titans stand as a guard around your thoughts. They are unyielding, they are eternal, and they are finally ready to have their story told in full. From the first rock placed by Regigigas to the last spark of energy in Regieleki, this is the story of the legendary Titans. The legendary Titans are defined by a silence so deep it spans the history of our world. They do not speak, they do not cry out. Their presence is a heavy, physical weight of time itself, a stillness that feels less like the quiet of a sleeping creature and more like the absolute pause of a glacier, or the unyielding patience of a mountain that has watched empires rise and crumble into dust. There is an enigma that surrounds them, a profound mystery that has puzzled historians, archaeologists, and champions ever since their ancient chambers were first unsealed. They feel less like living creatures and more like forces, or perhaps ideas, given form. The idea of endurance, the concept of permanence, an age long before humanity learned to forge its own paths or write its own history. They are the walking archives of a forgotten world. Look at their faces. They aren't faces in the traditional sense, are they? They are maps. Maps made of dots. 7 dots specifically, arranged in a pattern that mirrors the ancient human language of Braille, a coincidence of our modern perception rather than a true linguistic link, yet undeniably intentional. The patterns themselves feel like a code, a key left for someone to find, a geometric prayer carved into the stone of a being that cannot pray, but the dots are just the surface of the visual language. The true story is told in the materials that compose them. Unyielding materials. Regirock is not simply a creature assembled from stone. It is a pile of ancient, continental basalt and granite, held together by a binding primeval will, a will that refuses to let the entropy of the earth claim it. Regice is not merely frozen water. It is struck from the ice of the most ferocious primordial oceans, frozen instantly into a crystalline lattice of absolute zero, a temperature that should not exist in a stable form. And Registeel, Registeel is forged from a metal that fell from the heavens, a meteoric alloy that cannot rust, cannot decay, a substance from beyond the sky. These materials do not age, they merely wait. And what are these materials, if not the very substance of human history? The Stone Age, when our ancestors first shaped the rock into tools and monuments. The Ice Age, when the world was locked in a deep, grinding freeze, and survival itself was a battle against a silent, creeping cold. The Iron Age, when civilization learned to smelt the earth, to bend metal to its will, and to build empires of steel. The legendary titans are not merely artifacts of these epochs. They are these epochs, personified and crystallized into guardians. They are the physical memory of the deep time of the planet. To understand them, we must first gaze upon the one who shaped them in its own stark image, Regice, the master of the Titans. In the oldest myths of the Sinnoh region, buried in the texts of the Celestic Town ruins, there is a story of a being tasked with taming a world that was still boiling, still raw, from the moment of creation. This Regice, this colossal force, is said to have pulled the very continents across the globe, like a weaver pulling a thread across a loom. The land masses of our planet once drifted aimlessly, touching and separating in chaos, and Regice guided them into their current silent positions. It is said that after this monumental labor, the master looked upon the raw elements of the newly settled world and decided to forge servants, children, in its own image. Yet its power was too great for the fragile world it had created. In one telling of the myth, Regice underestimated its own strength, while freezing the oceans to create Regice. The resulting frost did not just create its servant, it erupted outward, freezing the entire ancient landscape, creating the vast, permanent glaciers of Snowpoint. Because of this immense, uncontrollable force, Regice was sealed away in the deepest basement of Snowpoint Temple. The creator was bound by the very power that defined it, sealed by its own children, or by the gods that feared its ambition. But here is the first deep tension in this legend. The mythology of the Hoenn region, far to the south, tells a completely different story. A story where Arceus is absent. A story where it was humanity itself who forged the Titans. Here, ancient alchemists and master smiths, weavers of spells and metal, are said to have created the Regi as living weapons for a legendary king of Hoenn. They were tools of absolute conquest, made by human hands for human wars. But the people, seeing the devastation they had wrought upon the world, eventually grew to fear them. They sealed the Regice away in 3 stone structures, locking them in the dark, waiting for a time when their power would be needed again, or perhaps hoping that time would never come. Which story is true? Were they carved from the raw elements of the earth by the will of a creator god, or forged from the ambition and fear of humanity? This duality, this profound silence surrounding their true origin, is the heart of their mystery. They offer no answers. They only stand. They only wait. They are the silent foundation upon which the entire history of the Pokémon world is built. We will begin our journey through these ancient ages with the first of the materials, the absolute foundation stone, the bedrock upon which all other structures were built. Up next is Chapter 2, Regirock and the Foundations of Earth. Let the first age begin. We spoke in the first chapter of a silence that spans millennia, of shapes carved from the unyielding earth, and of patterns that speak without sound. Those patterns, 3 dots arranged in a line, then a circle, then a line, are not just a language, they are a signature, a fingerprint pressed into stone by a force that understood the world in its rawest, most elemental form. That language is carved into the faces of the legendary Titans, and no Titan wears it more literally than the one we turn to now, Regirock, the Rock Peak Pokémon. The very first of the trio, the foundation upon which the others were built, both in lore and in the sequence of human history it represents. Let us consider what Regirock actually is. It is not a creature of flesh or bone. It is not a being of fur or scale. It is a collection, a mosaic, a living, breathing catalogue of stones gathered from every corner of the globe. If you could somehow peel back the layers of its form, though you would be met with the same resilient stone at every depth, you would find a geological record of the entire planet. Basalt from ancient volcanic eruptions, granite from the roots of mountain ranges, limestone from the beds of long-dried seas, obsidian from the violent cooling of lava, sandstone from deserts that have shifted for eons. Each pebble, each cobble, each boulder that makes up its body was chosen, or perhaps drawn, from a different place. No two specimens of Regirock are ever identical, because the stones themselves are never exactly the same. In the games, a single iconic design, a rust-colored bulk with a face like a carved mask. But in the lore, every Regirock is a unique assembly. It is, in a very real sense, a walking anthology of the Earth's crust. This mosaic speaks to something deeper than mere composition. Regirock is the embodiment of the Stone Age, the dawn of human tools, the first moment our ancestors looked at a rock and saw not an obstacle, but an instrument. The Stone Age is the longest chapter in human prehistory, spanning over 2.5 million years. It is the time when a sharp-edged flint meant food, when a heavy boulder meant shelter, when fire was first kindled against stone. Regirock carries that weight. Its body is not just random rubble, it is the raw material of civilization. Before metal, before agriculture, before the written word, there was stone. The first hammer, the first knife, the first wheel, the first wall, all born from the same substance that now pulses with ancient awareness inside Regirock. When you look at Regirock, you are looking at the first tool, the first weapon, the first building block of every kingdom that would ever rise. And yet, Regirock is not a static relic, it repairs itself. If a piece of its body is shattered, cracked by a powerful blow, chipped off in a fall, or even completely pulverized, it will seek out new stones from its environment and incorporate them into its form. This is not a magical transformation. It is a physical, almost mechanical process. Regirock will press itself against a cliff face or roll over a rocky stream bed, and the loose stones will adhere to its body, filling the gaps. Over time, the foreign rock becomes part of the whole, the new material, indistinguishable from the old. This is how Regirock survives across the ages. It does not regenerate like flesh. It repairs like a structure. It is a creature that builds itself anew, with whatever the earth provides, forever adapting, forever renewing its own foundation. In a way, this mirrors the human relationship with stone. We, too, have always used the materials around us to rebuild what time erodes. A stone wall that crumbles is rebuilt with new stones from the same field. A stone axe that breaks is resharpened from the same quarry. Regirock does the same, but with consciousness. Now think about the environment where Regirock is traditionally found. In the Hoenn region, its resting place is a cave of orange rock, the desert ruins, surrounded by shifting sands and harsh sunlight. It is a place of extremes, scorching by day, freezing by night, where the only constant is the stone itself. Regirock thrives in such isolation, not because it needs solitude, but because the silence of the desert mirrors its own inner stillness. It waits. It does not sleep in the way we understand sleep. It simply exists, unmoving, for centuries, until the moment someone solves the puzzle of its chamber. And what a puzzle it is. The brailled instructions speak of cutting a hole in the wall, of carrying a specific Pokémon with a specific move. The human who approaches Regirock must prove they understand the language of patterns, the same language that marks its face. It is a test of observation, patience, and respect for the old ways. Regirock's power is tied directly to its construction. Its signature attacks draw strength from the earth. Rock slide, stone edge, hammer arm, moves that feel heavy, that land with the weight of an avalanche. But there is a tragic irony in its strength. Regirock was created, in one version of the myth, by Regice, using the rocks of the newly formed world. In another version, it was built by human alchemists, forged as a weapon for a conquering king. Either way, it was made to endure, to resist, to stand as an unbreakable wall. But its very endurance is also its prison. Sealed in that cave, it has no one to fight, no purpose to fulfill, only the slow march of geological time. It is patient because it has no choice. Its body is a record of every stone it has ever touched, and its memory is as old as the bedrock beneath our feet. There is a quiet awe in Regirock that we rarely give it credit for. We often think of the legendary titans as simple, as mindless golems, but consider what it means to be a living mosaic. Regirock carries the history of the Earth on its shoulders. Every stone is a fossil of a moment, a chapter in a story that began long before any Pokémon or human could read or write. And when it repairs itself, it does not forget the old stones. It integrates the new ones, creating a composite that tells a story of survival, of adaptation, of the world's constant, slow reshaping. It is a monument to the Stone Age, but also to the enduring truth that even the hardest things can change. And as we stand here, watching Regirock in its silent vigil, we must remember that it is not alone. Beyond the desert, beyond the mountains, there is ice waiting, a different kind of ancient cold, a ferocity frozen into form. That is the story we will step into next. A story of oceans turned to crystal, of a being born from the deep freeze of the world's most terrifying waters. The rock peak has held its ground, but soon we must face Regice and the ferocious oceans, and learn what happens when the earth itself is locked in ice. Until then, let the stones speak, let the silence rest, and let Regirock guard the foundation of everything. We trace the birth of the first of the Titans, Regirock, to the very foundations of the earth, to a time when Regice shaped the world using the rawest of materials, stone piled upon stone, creating a vessel of unyielding strength. That first Titan was an expression of early human existence. The Stone Age, the era of the simple tool, the hammer, the foundation. But as that age of crude stone passed, the planet took a dramatic turn. The climate shifted. The warmth that allowed early life to spread retreated. The world entered a period of violent cooling. And in response to this new, unforgiving chapter of history, a second Titan was forged from the chaos. Regice turned its gaze from the cold, inert stone to the most dynamic substance on the planet at that time, the water of the ferocious oceans. Imagine the seas not as we know them today, but as raging, untamed entities crashing against a newly formed land. The text of the ancient myths says that Regice did not merely freeze this water, it seized it mid-fury. It took the crashing waves of the most violent storms and flash froze them, not into a simple iceberg, but into a perfectly structured entity. This was not a gentle crystallization, it was an act of immense will. Regice compressed the essence of entire prehistoric oceans into a single geometric body. The result was Regice. Where Regirock was assembled, Regice was carved from a single moment of the planet's most extreme climate crisis. Its core is that ancient water, trapped in a state of perfect, eternal cold. This origin explains a fascinating paradox. Something made of ice should be fragile. It should have a melting point. Yet the law is very clear. Regice cannot be melted, even by magma, even by the direct concentrated heat of a volcano. Why? Because it was not born from the water cycle we know. It was born from the concept of the deep freeze. The temperature of its body is said to approach absolute zero. If you were to touch it, the air around you would crystallize. The water in your own breath would freeze and fall to the ground like snow. It is not cold because it is made of ice. The cold. It is the point at which all energy stops. Heat cannot melt it because, within its frame, heat is simply an impossibility. It represents a state of matter that defies the geologic furnace of the earth. It is the perfect unmeltable object, a prison of ancient cold that seals the history of the planet within its chest. And that is the third layer of its symbolism. As the Ice Age receded and the world warmed, Regice remained. It remained as a record. In the real world, we study ice cores to understand Earth's deep past. Layers of trapped air, volcanic ash, and ancient pollen are sealed within the glaciers of Antarctica and Greenland. Regice is the ultimate ice core. It is the living time capsule of the planet. When you look at Regice, you are looking at the preserved fury of an ancient ocean. It is the keeper of a history that occurred before any written record, before human memory. It stands as a silent, unmoving testament to the fact that history is often preserved not by warmth, but by a profound, unwavering cold. But as this deep freeze preserved the old world, another force was beginning to stir in the heavens above that frozen landscape. Regice created a vessel for the next great age of the planet, one not defined by preserving the past, but by forging the future. Lying in the craters where fire fell from the sky, the material for the next Titan waited for a purpose. A metal so pure it could bind the very structure of the Earth together. This would be the transition from survival to control, from ice to steel. And the story of that metal, born from fire and found among the stars, is the next chapter we will explore together. And so we leave behind the frozen silence of Regice, its body a monument to an age when the world was locked in ice. But as that great thaw began, something else was falling from the sky, something that would forever change the course of human history and the very nature of the Titans themselves. For while Regice was born of water and cold, its counterpart Registeel was born of fire and stone, but not the stone of our own world. Registeel is by any measure an anomaly. Its body is composed of a metal that does not occur naturally on Earth. This is not a poetic exaggeration, but a literal truth. Every known sample of Registeel ever studied, every fragment chipped from its surface in the deepest laboratories of the Pokémon world, has confounded geologists and metallurgists alike. The alloy is unlike any found in the planet's crust. It does not rust, does not corrode, and does not yield to any known form of heat or pressure. Some researchers have suggested that the metal is extraterrestrial, a meteoritic iron that fell to Earth in a time before recorded history. Consider the implications. Registeel is not forged from ore that was mined from the ground. It is a creature assembled from pieces of a fallen star, and this connection to the cosmos ties it directly to the great turning point in human civilization, the Iron Age. Before that era, our ancestors worked with stone and bone, and later with copper and bronze. But the discovery of how to smelt iron, how to extract it from the earth and shape it into tools, was a revolution. And that revolution may have been sparked by the arrival of meteoric iron, a metal that fell from the heavens, already refined by fire and velocity, ready to be hammered into blades and plowshares. Registeel is that same principle given form, but there is a deeper mystery to Registeel's construction. Its body is hollow. Yes, hollow. Inside that impenetrable skin, there is an empty space, a void where organs might have been, if it were a living creature in the conventional sense. Instead, that emptiness is part of its function. The structure is like a bell or a resonator. When Registeel moves, the air inside its shell vibrates with a low humming tone, a sound that has been described as both mournful and ancient. Some believe that the hollow interior is a kind of prison, a cage for a consciousness that cannot escape. Others argue that it is a deliberate design, a way to amplify its own internal energy, making each blow it delivers resonate with the force of a meteor impact. And that brings us to the terrifying durability of its skin. Registeel's armor is not merely strong, it is virtually indestructible. In the games, it shrug off attacks that would shatter mountains. In lore, it is said that no weapon ever crafted by human hands has left a scratch on its surface. Not the most advanced steel alloys, not the cleverest alloys of titanium and tungsten, even the legendary weapons forged by the ancients, imbued with the souls of Pokémon, have failed to dent it. The only force that has ever been known to damage Registeel is the pressure of the Earth itself, over millennia, slowly grinding against it from within the sealed chambers where it sleeps. But why? Why such an immortal shell around a hollow heart? Perhaps the answer lies in Registeel's purpose. It was not built to fight. It was built to endure, to wait, to outlast the ages. The Iron Age, the Bronze Age, the Age of Steel, they all come and go. Empires rise and fall. But Registeel remains, standing guard over a secret that may never be spoken aloud. And that secret may be tied to the being that forged it. For if Registeel is made of meteoritic metal, then its creator must have had access to materials from beyond our world. And that creator, of course, is the great Colossus that sleeps in the frozen north of Sinnoh, But that is a story for another time. For now, let us rest in the quiet hum of Registeel's hollow chamber, knowing that even the most unyielding metal holds emptiness within. And that emptiness may be the most terrifying thing of all. In the next chapter, we will explore the being that gave Registeel its form, the Master of the Titans, the one who pulled the continents and who was sealed away for his own power, the Colossus of Sinnoh. We ended the last chapter with Registeel, a creature forged from metal that fell from the sky, a living artifact of the Iron Age. But metal, ice and stone are not the end of the story. They are merely the building blocks of something far older, far larger, and far more terrifying. To understand the Regi Titans, we must leave Hoenn behind and travel north, to the frozen reaches of Sinnoh, where a legend lies buried beneath centuries of snow and silence. There, in the basement of Snowpoint Temple, sealed behind doors that no human hand has opened in living memory, sleeps the Master of the Titans. Its name is Regice, and if the other Regis are the children, then Regice is the parent, the architect, the engine that pulled a world into shape. Let me tell you what we know. Regice is not merely another Titan, it is the source. According to the oldest myths of Sinnoh, this Pokémon existed before the continents had settled, before the oceans had cooled. It was sent, or perhaps it simply rose, to tame a world still raw from creation. With its immense strength, it gripped the land masses and dragged them across the planet, pushing mountains up like wrinkles in a cloth, carving valleys with its fingers. It is said that the very shape of the modern world is a record of its labour. But Regice did not work alone. It created helpers. From the rocks that had been scattered by its own movements, it shaped Regirock. From the ice that formed in the shadow of its breath, it shaped Regice. From the meteoric metals it found buried in the earth, it shaped Registeel. And later it turned to stranger energies, pure lightning to create Regieleki, and crystallized dragon essence to create Regidrago. Each of these was a child, a tool, an extension of its will. But Regice itself is something else entirely. If you look at Regice, you see the evidence of its work. Its body is not a single material but a mosaic. Its torso is formed of sections that seem to mimic the rocky plates of Regirock, the crystalline blue of Regice, and the metallic sheen of Registeel. Its legs are striped like layered stone. Its head bears a pattern of 7 dots, echoing the 3 dots of its children, but more complex, more ancient. It is as though Regice is a walking museum of everything it has ever created, a living composite of the ages it has witnessed. Its size is staggering. While the other Regis stand at just over 5.5 feet tall, Regice towers at over 12 feet, but height alone does not convey its scale. In the lore, it is described as having the power to pull continents, to freeze oceans with a single thought, to move with a force that would shatter mountains. Compared to other legendary Pokémon, Regice is one of the few that is said to have physically reshaped the world. Not through energy beams or weather control, but through sheer, raw, brute strength. It is the heaviest known fighting-type Pokémon, weighing nearly 880 pounds, and yet it moves slowly, deliberately, as if conserving energy for a task that has not yet come. The tragedy of Regice is that its power became its prison. In the Sinnoh myths, it is said that Regice once tried to freeze the ocean to create Regis, but it misjudged its own strength. The cold it produced was so intense that it spread uncontrollably, blanketing the surrounding land in a sheet of ice that never melted. That place became the Snowpoint region, and the people who lived there, or perhaps the gods themselves, decided that such a being could not be allowed to roam freely. They sealed Regice in the deepest chamber of Snowpoint Temple, and they built the temple around it, layer upon layer of stone and ice, to keep it contained. The titans it had created were scattered, some to Hoenn, where they were later sealed by humans, others to Galar, where they slept in the crown Tundra. But the master remained, a colossus in the dark, waiting. What is most remarkable is that Regice does not appear to be malevolent. Its actions were those of a creator, not a destroyer. but creation is a violent act. To shape the world, you must break the world, and perhaps that is why it was sealed. Not because it was evil, but because its very existence was too much for a fragile planet to endure. It was a force of nature, and nature cannot be tamed. It can only be hidden. There is another layer to this story, one that involves a conflict far older than the human kingdoms of Hoenn. In the deeper corners of Sinnoh mythology, some whisper that Regice was not merely a servant of Arceus, but a rival, that it tried to claim the title of creator for itself, forging the Titans in its own image as a challenge to the original, and that Arceus in its judgment struck Regice down, but could not unmake it. Instead, it blessed the Titan with a peculiar gift, the ability to regenerate its power during battle, as if Arceus itself was forced to acknowledge that some things, once created, cannot be unmade. This is the blessing and the curse of Regice. It is the father of Titans, but also their prisoner, bound by its own strength, waiting in the cold dark of Snowpoint Temple for a day that may never come. And that day, if it ever arrives, will not be quiet. It will be the day the Colossus rises, when the temple shatters and the continents begin to shift once more, because Regice did not simply pull the land into place and stop. It is waiting to do it again. That story, the story of a creature that can rearrange the very earth, is the one we must tell next. It is the story of the continent shifter. Regice stands as a composite of all that came before it, the stone of the earliest foundations, the ice of the planet's deepest freezes, the metal of meteoritic impacts. Its bulk suggests a being built for endurance, for a singular purpose that transcends the movements of common life, and the law that surrounds it tells of a task so monumental that it quite literally reshaped the face of the world. The myth of Regice, pulling the continents with ropes, is the most visceral image associated with any legendary Pokémon. It is not a gentle guiding of currents, but a violent physical act of hauling. Anchors of crystallized power were plunged into the crust, and cables of pure energy strained against the weight of entire landmasses. Think of the grinding of stone against the mantle, the groaning of the earth as it was stretched and torn away from its neighbors. This was not a quiet miracle. It was a loud, catastrophic, and necessary reshaping. The geological impact of a single Pokémon shaping the world's map is a concept that fractures our understanding of scale entirely. Regice did not just rearrange the furniture of the planet. It dictated the flow of oceans and the birth of climates. The sheer physical strength required to move tectonic plates is a number that has no meaning in standard physics. We are talking about forces that rival the deep mantle currents of the Earth itself. Regice becomes an extension of these natural forces, a conscious agent of continental drift. Every step it took in that ancient era left a permanent mark on the geography we know today. Mountains rose in its wake like the folds of a pushed carpet. Oceans rushed into the gaps it left behind, but paused to consider the burden, to be the force that binds the world, only to be sealed away. This is the tragedy of Regice. Its power was so immense that the world could not handle its presence. Once its job was done, it had to be hidden, locked in a basement beneath the snow of Sinnoh, the same snow that, according to one version of the myth, was created by its own accident when it was wrestling the ferocious oceans to create Regice. The frost spread, a constant reminder of the power that could not be fully controlled, a glacial scar left on the face of the planet by a single miscalculation. The children it created, the titans of rock, ice, steel, and the newer beings of dragon and electric energy, were scattered. Did they feel the loss of their creator? Were they saddened by its imprisonment, or relieved to be free from its overwhelming presence? The Regice are silent on the matter, their faces as unreadable as the ancient stones and ores they are made of. They wait in their sealed chambers, perhaps for a time when the master of continents will stir again. And yet, before the silence, before the long sleep in the temple, there was the final act. The world was shaped. The continents were anchored. The oceans had cooled. But the stage was empty. The story of Regice is not just one of continental shifting and brute strength. It is the prelude to a much deeper mystery. Having moved the very bones of the earth, Regigigas turned its attention to a much finer, more delicate task, the shaping of the elements into life. This was the next step, the most crucial step. This is what we must explore next. The moment the shaper became the maker, the moment it began the act of creation. After Regigigas finished pulling the continents into place, the world was still raw and unformed. The land masses had been dragged across the primordial ocean, groaning and settling into their new positions. But the planet itself was a blank canvas waiting for a master artisan, and Regigigas was just that, a sculptor with no hands, only elemental will. The same force that had moved mountains now turned inward. And in that turning, the act of creation began. The first element Regigigas reached for was water. Not just any water, the ferocious oceans that had churned and crashed against the newborn continents. These waters were wild, untamed, alive with the memory of the planet's violent cooling. Regigigas lowered itself into the deepest trench, where pressure and cold had already begun to crystallize the sea. Then it did something that defies physics as we understand it. It held still, and the water around it began to freeze, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. A core of absolute zero expanded like a slow explosion, locking the ocean into a single monolithic block. The creature that emerged from that frozen heart was Regice, but the process was not simple. Regigigas had to concentrate the cold itself, drawing the heat out of the water molecule by molecule until every drop was bound in a crystalline lattice so dense that not even magma could melt it. The ice of Regice is not normal ice. It is a memory of the moment the planet first learned to freeze, and Regigigas, in its patience, shaped that ice into a form that could move, think, and endure. The first Titan was born from a deliberate stillness, a pause in the world's chaos. Next came the stone. Regigigas travelled to the oldest mountains, those that had been lifted by its own continent pulling. It gathered rocks from every corner of the globe, basalt from the ocean floor, granite from the deep crust, obsidian from volcanic vents, sandstone from ancient seabeds. It crushed them together, not with force, but with a kind of gravitational pull, binding them into a single body. Each stone retained its own history, its own colour and texture, but together they formed a being of remarkable strength and stubbornness. That was Regirock, a patchwork of the Earth's memory. But stone alone is brittle. Regigigas needed something stronger, something that could withstand the pressures of a world still settling. It looked to the sky, where meteors had been falling since the planet's birth. Some of those meteors carried metals never found naturally in Earth's crust, extraterrestrial alloys forged in the hearts of dying stars. Regigigas collected these fragments, smelting them not with fire, but with pure kinetic energy. It pounded the meteoritic ore with its own fists, each strike sending shockwaves through the continent. The metal began to glow, not with heat, but with a cold magnetic light. From that glowing mass, Registeel was shaped. The specific process of smelting meteoritic ore required Regigigas to understand the metal's atomic structure, to rearrange it into a lattice that could conduct energy without breaking. It is said that Registeel's body is so perfectly bonded that it can reflect any attack, and that its internal composition is a perfect alloy of iron, nickel, and a third element unknown to human science. Regigigas had to become a blacksmith without a forge, a metallurgist without equations. It simply willed the metal to obey. And here we arrive at the philosophical question that lingers over all of this. Regigas is not the first creator. That title belongs to Arceus, who shaped the universe from a single egg. But Regigigas is a secondary creator, a craftsman who took what already existed and gave it new purpose. This is a role rarely given to Pokémon in any mythology. Not just to destroy or protect, but to build from scratch, to look at raw elements and see potential where others see only matter. Regigigas did not merely summon these titans. It conceived them, laboured over them, and gave them a will of their own. What does it mean for a Pokémon to act as a surrogate creator? It implies that creation is not a single event, but a chain. Arceus made the world, and then Regice made the instruments that would shape the world further. Each of the original 3 titans carries a fragment of Regice's own essence, a spark of the same force that pulled continents. They are not independent gods. They are extensions of a single will, children of a parent who knew they would one day be forgotten. Yet the act of creation is never without consequence. While freezing the ferocious oceans to form Regice miscalculated. The cold did not stop at the Titan's body. It radiated outward, spreading across the northern sea and onto the land. What was meant to be a controlled transformation became an accident of ice, a glacial advance that would later shape the entire Sinnoh region. That accident would have repercussions for millennia, sealing Regice itself away in a temple built over a wound in the earth. And it is that very accident, the one that froze the world a little too thoroughly, that we will explore when we turn our attention to the Snowpoint Temple and the story of what happened when a creator's power slipped beyond its grasp. We have spoken of how Regice forged the original trio from raw elemental materials, how it plunged its hands into the molten rock of newborn mountains to shape Regirock, how it gathered the metallic fragments of fallen stars to craft Registeel. But of all its creations, none was born from a more violent act than Regice, and that act left a scar upon the world that remains frozen to this day. The legend of the Ferocious Oceans is not merely a metaphor. It describes a time when the seas of the ancient world were not yet tamed, before the continents were pulled into their resting places, before the temperature of the planet had settled. The oceans raged with an untamed fury. They were alive with the energy of a world still cooling from its birth. Waters that could boil at a touch and churn with enough force to erode the very bedrock. Regice saw these oceans and understood that they must be contained, shaped, and ultimately frozen into a servant. But Regice was not a gentle sculptor. Its hands were made for pulling mountains, not for cradling water. When it reached into the ferocious oceans to extract the essence of ice, it exerted a force far beyond what was necessary. The freezing was not a gentle crystallization. It was a catastrophic flash freeze. The water did not simply turn to ice. It exploded into glaciers, expanding outward in every direction with the violence of 1,000 avalanches. This was the birth of Regice, a being of pure, absolute cold, its body forged from the most turbulent moments of the planet's hydrological history. Yet Regice, in its moment of creation, did not stop the cold. The power that had frozen the oceans continued to radiate outward, unchecked. It raced across the land, turning rain to sleet, rivers to sosh and entire forests to brittle sculptures of frost. The glaciers of Snowpoint did not grow slowly over millennia. They were born in an instant, a single catastrophic event that reshaped the northern reaches of Sinnoh in a matter of heartbeats. This was the Snowpoint Accident, a moment when the Master of Titans lost control of its own strength and the world paid the price. The environmental scars left by the Titan's birth in the Sinnoh region are not subtle. You can see them in the geography. The jagged ice-scoured valleys that lead to Snowpoint City, the permafrost that runs deeper than any drill has ever reached, and the eerie silence of the frozen lakes that never thaw, even in the height of summer. The land itself remembers that day. The rock formations near the base of Mount Coronet bear striations that could only have been carved by a sudden, massive ice sheet moving at unnatural speed. And beneath the ice, there are stories frozen in time. Fossils of creatures that lived in a warmer era, now entombed forever by the aftermath of Regice's creation. Regice itself is a walking monument to that accident. Its body is composed of ice that has never melted, not even when exposed to the magma of volcanic eruptions. This is not ordinary ice. It is the frozen essence of the ferocious oceans, a substance that exists at a temperature far below any natural freezing point. Scientists and Pokémon researchers have tried to melt a sample of Regice's shell with focused thermal beams. They have failed. The ice is so impossibly cold that it absorbs heat rather than releasing it, radiating an aura of absolute zero that can freeze the air around it into a mist of tiny crystals. And yet Regis is not a mindless force of destruction. It is a creation of Regigigas, and it carries within it a fragment of its master's will, a will to serve, to protect, to maintain the balance of the frozen world. But the tragedy of the Snowpoint accident is that this will was born from a mistake. Regigigas did not intend to freeze an entire region. It simply underestimated the scope of its own power, and in that moment of hubris, or perhaps of innocent miscalculation, it scarred Sinnoh forever. Those scars are still visible today in the behaviour of the land. The glaciers of Snowpoint do not move like normal glaciers. They are stationary, locked in place, as if waiting for a command. The ice does not melt and refreeze with the seasons. It remains unchanging, a constant reminder of the day the Master of Titans created its Ice Child, and in doing so, lost control. Some say that if you walk to the edge of the Snowpoint Temple at midnight, when the wind dies and the stars are hidden by clouds, you can hear a low hum beneath the ice, a sound like a heartbeat, a sound like regret. Regigigas was sealed away in that very temple, perhaps as much for its own protection as for the safety of the world. The Snowpoint accident taught the ancient peoples that even a creator can be dangerous. They did not punish Regigigas. They honoured it, but they also imprisoned it, lest another accident reshape the planet again. Now the ice remains and Regis waits. It waits for its master to stir, for the day when the glaciers of Snowpoint might be called upon to move once more. But until then, the environmental scars of that birth serve as a silent warning. The power that forged the Titans is not a power to be trifled with. It is a power that can freeze oceans, shift continents, and in a single unguarded moment, change the face of the world forever. And what of Regigas's greater purpose? What of the emissary that Arceus once sent to tame the world? That story, of the conflict between the Master of Titans and the Alpha, has its roots in the same frozen ground. But that is a tale for another chapter, a tale that begins with the Snowpoint accident and ends with a judgment that would echo through eternity. The chapter is called The Emissary of the Alpha, and it holds the answer to why Regigigas was truly sealed. The Snowpoint accident serves as a testament to Regigigas's raw power, a power that could not fully anticipate its own consequences. But to understand why Regigigas wielded such force in the first place, we must travel back to the beginning of the Sinnoh creation myth. In this telling, Regigigas was not simply a being that emerged from the earth on its own. It was chosen. Before the world was shaped into the landmasses we recognize today, before the mountains were raised and the oceans tamed, there was only primordial chaos. Arceus, the creator of all, looked upon this disorder and decided that it needed a steward, an entity that could bring order to the violent and untamed elements. And so from the void, Arceus created Regigas not as a rival, not as an equal, but as its emissary. The divine mandate was clear: tame the chaotic, newly formed world, bring structure to the shapeless forces, and prepare the land for the life that would one day inhabit it. This mission defined Regigigas's very existence. It was the first of its kind, born directly from the will of the Alpha itself. That mandate was not a suggestion. It was a command woven into the fabric of Regigigas being. In the Sinnoh lore, the relationship between Arceus and Regigigas is one of profound trust and immense responsibility. Arceus entrusted the entire physical world to its creation. Regigigas was to be the hand of the Creator on Earth, the instrument through which order was imposed on disorder. It began its work by shaping the continents themselves, pulling them into place with colossal ropes, a myth that echoes in the geological structures we still study today. But beyond the physical labour of pulling land masses across the globe, Regigigas was also tasked with subduing the ferocious forces of nature. The oceans were too wild, their waters too restless. The lands were too unstable, constantly shifting under the weight of creation. So Regigigas forged helpers from the very materials of that primordial world. It created Regirock from ancient stones, dug from the deepest caves, Registeel from meteoritic metal that fell from the sky, and Regice from the frozen waters of the deep and violent seas. These were not just servants. They were extensions of Regigigas' will, tools designed for the taming. The relationship between the creator of all and the master of titans is a complex one, layered with purpose and consequence. Regigigas was given authority over the physical world, but it was still subject to the alpha it served. Some myths suggest that as Regigigas worked, it began to see itself differently. Having created the other Regice in its own image, it started to perceive itself as a creator in its own right. This was not necessarily rebellion at first, but rather a natural consequence of its role. The divine mandate required strength and independence, but it also required humility. For a time, the balance held. The world began to settle. The continents found their places, and the climate stabilized into patterns that would support life. Regigigas had succeeded in its appointed task. The chaotic world had been tamed, but the very power that allowed for such success also contained the seed of a deeper tension. As Regigigas continued its work, the relationship with Arceus began to shift. It was no longer just a servant receiving commands. It was an active creator, a shaper of the earth in its own image. The act of forging the Regice, of breathing life into stone and metal and ice, gave Regigigas a sense of ownership over the world it had shaped. It started to believe, perhaps, that it had done the work alone. The memory of the divine mandate, the original command from the Alpha, began to fade into the background of its own accomplishments. This shift in perspective would not go unnoticed. The world was tamed, but at what cost to the relationship between the Emissary and the Creator? The Snowpoint Accident was more than just an accident. It was a symptom of a larger imbalance. Regigigas' power was immense, and when it created Regice, the frost it generated did not just freeze the ocean. It spread beyond control, creating the ancient glaciers of Sinnoh. This was not a failure of power, but a failure of precision. The mandate required control, and Regigigas was starting to lose it. Or perhaps, it was starting to assert its own will over the original design. The relationship with Arceus was being tested. The Creator had given much to its Emissary, but it expected obedience and fidelity to the original plan. The Master of Titans, however, was growing in its own sense of purpose. It had tamed the world, and in doing so, it had begun to see itself as the rightful authority over it. So the stage was set for a confrontation that echoed through mythology. The taming of the world was complete, but Regigigas' role was evolving. It was no longer just an emissary carrying out a mandate. It was becoming something more. Something that would challenge the very structure of creation. This pride, this belief in its own supremacy as a creator rather than a servant, would lead to a direct conflict with the Alpha itself. The bond between the Creator and the Master of Titans was about to be tested in a way that would define the rest of the Regi legend, and that confrontation, the consequences of such ambition, is the subject of the next chapter in this history. A tale of what happens when a servant forgets its place and reaches for something it was never meant to hold. It is called the Sin of Pride. In the shadow of Mount Coronet, at the very heart of the Sinnoh region, the story of creation is not a simple, singular act. It is a hierarchy. At the top sits the Alpha, the original one, Arceus. Directly beneath it, tasked with the brutal, sacred labor of shaping the formless chaos into a living world, stood Regigigas, the Colossus, the continent shifter. It pulled the land masses into place with ropes of sheer energy, its fists gripping the earth itself. It froze the ferocious oceans to birth Regice. It forged the legendary titans from the very bones of the planet, from meteoritic steel and raw mountain stone. For an immeasurable age, this arrangement was stable, balanced, and sacred. The Alpha commanded from the heavens, and the giant obeyed from the mud and the bedrock. But creation itself is a transformative act, and performing the work of a god day after day, millennium after millennium, does something to the heart of even the most loyal servant. The problem with shaping an entire world is that you begin to see your own fingerprints everywhere. Regigigas did not just move the mountains, it felt the weight of them grinding against its palms. It did not just create the Regi, it poured its own primal strength into their core, its own will, into their stone and ice and steel. Every seismic shift, every carved valley, every frozen sea was a testament to power, not merely the distant will of its master. In the lonely, crushing silence of an unfinished world, with only the howl of the wind and the groan of tectonic plates for company, a thought began to crystallize deep within the Colossus, a dangerous thought. It began not as outright defiance, but a simple observation. But over time, that observation became a comfort, and the comfort became a whisper, and the whisper hardened into a solid, unshakable statement of truth within its own mind. This is the seed of the fan-favorite theory of the conflict between Regigigas and Arceus. This is the story of the sin of pride. According to this strand of the deeper mythology, Regigigas made its alleged claim to be the true creator of life, not just the shaper of land, but the originator of the spark itself. The lore suggests a subtle but world-altering shift in Regigigas's behavior. When it spoke to its children, the legendary titans, it no longer spoke of Arceus. It spoke only of itself. It stopped looking up to the heavens. It no longer acknowledged the chain of command that placed the Alpha above the giant. It looked up and saw not a master but a rival, began to believe that the hands which shaped the clay were more important than the mind which conceived the shape. This introduced a profound fracture into the fabric of the Pokémon world's mythology. It created an unbearable tension between divine authority and the power of the giants. Arceus represents the abstract, the cosmic law, the unspoken rules of reality that hold the universe together. Regigigas represents the physical, the tangible, the brute force of matter and energy moving through space. Arceus is the architect. Regigigas came to see itself as the builder, and every builder knows that the architect's plans are useless without the hands strong enough to execute them. In this growing tension, Regigigas believed it held the upper hand. It was the one in the trenches, the one pulling the ropes, the one with the muscle. It believed its power was the power. It had forgotten the source of that strength. It had forgotten the Alpha, who spoke the first word that set the universe into motion. It had forgotten the name of the one who granted it the divine mandate to tame the world in the first place. This act of hubris, this sin of pride, is the classic tragic flaw of the Colossus. It is the story of the golem who becomes too powerful for its own good, the creation who refuses to bow before its creator. In countless human mythologies, this is the archetypal story of the fall, the angels who rebelled, the titans who challenged the throne of Olympus. Regigigas is the Pokémon embodiment of this timeless tragedy. It stood at the absolute apex of its physical power, surrounded by its elemental children, believing it had surpassed its own origins. It didn't just build the prisons for the Regice, later in history, to keep them safe from humanity. In this moment, it was building a prison for itself, with every boastful thought, every usurped prayer. The throne of creation is a lonely, narrow seat. There is room for only one being at the top of the Sinnoh creation myth. And when two beings claim the same title, the universe itself must eventually choose a side. The world felt the shift. The continents seemed to hold their breath. The Regi children stood frozen, sensing the change in the cosmic pressure around them. What happens when the builder refuses the will of the architect? What happens when the servant claims the house as its own? Divine authority must reassert itself, or cease to be authority at all. The heavy hand of judgment was already falling, moving through the fabric of reality toward the Colossus who had forgotten its place. The chapter which explores this divine sentence, the direct consequence of this sin, is called the Judgment of Arceus, and it changes everything we thought we knew about the strength of the giants and the terrible severity of a creator wronged. The entity that once pulled the very continents into place, that forged life from stone and ice and steel, looked upon its work and saw itself as the origin point of all creation. This was the sin of pride. Regice, the master of the legendary titans, began to whisper a single, terrible word into the newly formed world itself. It claimed the power to create not as a gift, but as a right. And from the peak of Mount Coronet, where the veil between dimensions is thin, the alpha Pokémon heard this claim, the plate of the earth, the plate of the sky. All the plates of being turned their focus upon the rebellious giant. Arceus intervened not with a roar, but with a silent cosmic shift. A pressure descended upon Regice, a gravity that came not from the pull of the planet, but from the full, undivided attention of the divine. From the heavens, a column of pure white light descended. It carried every type, every element, every fundamental force of the Pokémon world, compressed into a single, ultimate strike. This was judgment. It did not burn or freeze. It unmade the illusion of independence. It stripped Regice of its immediate access to the raw power of the earth, the energy that allowed it to summon continents and freeze the ferocious oceans was severed at the source. The move Judgment is often thought of as a physical attack, but in this context, it was a surgical removal of arrogance, a severing of the cord that tied the giant directly to the infinite wellspring of creation. The giant that had tamed the world fell to its knees. Its body did not shatter, but its connection to the omnipotent did. It became a statue of its former self, dormant. The ancient texts tell of Regice being led into the deepest chamber of Snowpoint Temple, its footsteps heavy with the weight of its own humility. It was transformed into a sealed entity, a prisoner of its own hubris. The snows of Sinnoh piled over its chambers, hiding it from the world for millennia. It was not killed, it was made to wait. This seal is the very essence of a profound limitation. It is a lock on its soul that prevents it from accessing its full strength immediately. Regice can struggle, can move, but the divine energy coil within it is given only in drips, not the flood it once commanded. It must wait, it must endure, it must learn patience. But here is where the story deepens. Arceus is not a god of pure punishment. The judgment was severe, but it was not absolute. Within the very mechanism of the seal, a paradox was planted. The power was not destroyed. It was merely made to wait, to regenerate, to surge back twice as strong after tasting its own weakness. This mechanism, this divine mercy hidden within a curse, is a narrative of how a fall can lead to a greater rise. It is the topic of Chapter 12, the Blessing of Regeneration, and it reveals the truly beautiful balance Arceus placed at the very core of Regice's existence. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. When the light of Arceus's judgment faded, Regice did not shatter. It was not unmade. The fabric of the world it had woven was still intact. Arceus is many things, a creator, a judge, but it is not wasteful. To destroy Regice would have undone the continents the Titan had pulled into place, the oceans it had frozen, the metals it had forged. It would have been an act of cosmic vandalism, tearing apart the very framework it had so carefully overseen. So the Alpha spared the giant. But mercy, in the language of Arceus, does not mean freedom. It means a second chance disguised as a sentence. The nuance of the curse is that it was never intended to be a death sentence. It was a recalibration. Regice had claimed to be the true creator, or it had simply acted without permission. It had taken pride in its own work, forgetting the source of its mandate. Arceus, in its wisdom, understands that destruction is simple. Teaching a lesson requires a heavier hand, one that does not crush, but holds down. Regice would live, because the world still needed its strength. It would live, but it would have to wait to prove its worth again. It would have to learn patience. And so the curse took the form of what we know as the ability slow start. The Titan is stripped of its immediate power, its speed, its ability to act with full force from the first moment. For 5 turns, or in the language of the myth, an undetermined period of cosmic hibernation, Regice is a shadow of itself. Its body is heavy, its time feels slow, but the blessing of regeneration is woven directly into the mechanism. The power does not vanish, it merely goes dormant. Imagine a fire banked for the night, coals glowing under layers of ash. Given time a breath of oxygen, the flames will roar back to life. This is the purpose of slow start. It forces a period of reflection. It demands humility. And when the ability fades, the full terrifying might of the legendary Titan returns, often stronger than before, because it was held back. It is a cycle of restraint and release, designed to mimic the very creation of the world itself, a process that took eons, not moments. This is the symbolic heart of the Regice myth, a god granting a path to redemption through time. Not a swift pardon, but a long, slow walk back to grace. In many mythologies, pride is the downfall of giants. Here pride is the catalyst for a journey. Arceus gave Regice the greatest gift a being of pure strength can receive, the gift of understanding its own limits, to dwell in the Snowpoint Temple for generations, to be frozen, to be sealed, to be forced to sleep while the world changes above you. That is the lesson. The Titan awakens not just with its power restored, but with the wisdom of what it is to be powerless. The blessing of regeneration is time itself, a second chance earned through the steel of patience rather than the fire of rebellion. But this version of the story, the divine drama on the slopes of Mount Coronet, it is the legend of the North. What happens when the story of the Regice travels across the sea, when it is whispered by men rather than sung by gods? The answer lies buried under the ocean, in the currents off the coast of a land called Hoenn. The lore that surfaces there tells a different origin entirely, one that shifts the focus from divine hubris to human hands. This is the divergence that will define an entirely new perspective on the Titans, and it casts a long shadow back over everything we think we know. Our next chapter explores this very split, descending into the depths of the sealed chamber to uncover the mystery of the Hoenn Divergence. What happens to a myth when it travels south? The story of Regice, as it is told in the icy reaches of Sinnoh, is a closed loop of divine tragedy, a creation, a rebellion, a judgment, a slow regeneration. It is a perfect tragic cycle set in motion by the highest powers. But if you follow the trail of the Regi southward into the volcanic archipelago of Hoenn, you find that the loop has been cut. The cycle does not exist. The divinity has been drained out of the legend, replaced by something much more earthbound. This is the heart of the Hoenn Divergence, a fracture in the global mythology where the very origin of the Titans changes completely. In Sinnoh, the Regice are sacred. They are the torn-off pieces of a primordial giant, shaped by the hands of a god emissary. Regice breathed purpose into them. Arceus judged their maker. The entire narrative is framed by celestial conflict. The northern myths are obsessed with the why of creation, the moral struggle of power. Now, look south. The Regi caves in Hoenn are not temples to a sleeping master. They are prisons, built to contain a weapon. The legends speak of a human king, King Hoenn, who commanded armies of stone and ice. There is no mention of a creator in the sky, because the creator walked the earth. The contrast could not be sharper. One myth is a cautionary tale about the pride of a god. The other is a cautionary tale about the ambition of man. This absence is the defining characteristic of Hoenn Regi lore. It is not a gap in the historical record. It is a loud and deliberate silence. You will find no shrine to Regice in the Hoenn region. The ancient people who built the sealed chamber, who carved the braille messages into the stone, wrote a history that begins and ends with the three Titans. There is no creator in their origin story. Regirock, Regis and Registeel simply existed. They were built, they served, and they were sealed. The southern scribes had no need for the mythology of Snowpoint. Their world was not shaped by a distant alpha. It was forged in the heat of a smithy. This brings us directly to the theory of human creation. It is the only framework that makes sense of the Hoenn silence. Ancient alchemists, masters of elementalism, built the Regice not as children but as golems. They were war machines, constructed to enforce the will of a mortal kingdom. The materials match. Rock represents the foundation, the earth humanity builds upon. Ice represents nature controlled, frozen into submission into a weaponized state. Steel represents the peak of human engineering, the ability to refine the raw world into something precise and deadly. The Titans are a mirror of human history, not divine history. Regigigas created the Regice in the north to tame the physical world. In the south, humans created Regice to conquer the human world. The intent was the same, the drive to impose order on chaos. But the source of that power changed everything. This divergence forces us to reconcile two conflicting truths. Did a god create the tools, or did man create the gods in their own image? The Hoenn perspective is brutally pragmatic. It strips away the mysticism and leaves behind a story of hubris and consequence. The weaponized Titans were too powerful. The people revolted, the kingdom fell, and the Regice were locked away in the caves, where they still sleep today, their stone chambers, sealed by a culture that had learned to fear its own creations. There is no curse from Arceus in this story. No slow start, no divine regeneration. The curse was human ambition, a fire that burned so hot it eventually turned against itself and had to be buried. And if the Regice were truly built by human hands, that opens a door to the most fascinating chapter in this entire history. Who were these craftsmen? How did they gather the raw energy to animate steel and ice into living constructs? The records are scarce, buried deep in the ruins of the ancient Hoenn kingdom, but a trace remains. The stories speak of a secret order, a conclave of elementalists who knew how to bind a spirit to a stone body. Their identity is the final missing piece of this long divergence. This is the mystery we will unravel next. In the Chronicle of the Alchemists of Old, the Hoenn Divergence leaves us with a question that the myths of Sinnoh never had to answer. If Regigigas was not the creator of the Titans in this southern land, then whose hands held the hammer? Who breathed the spark of animation into stone and steel when the divine creator was silent? The legends of Hoenn do not speak of a god descending from the peak of Mount Coronet. They speak of fire and anvil. They speak of dust and ambition. They speak of the alchemists of old. These were not mere priests or kings who simply prayed for power and received it from the heavens. They were smiths, engineers, and philosophers who sought to replicate the very act of creation with their own hands. They studied the world not as a divine gift to be accepted, but as a system of levers and energies to be decoded. They desired to build something that had never been built before, a machine that could think for itself, a golem that could feel the weight of its own existence. In the quiet of their stone laboratories, far from the eyes of the gods they chose to ignore, they dedicated their lives to the single, consuming goal of forging life from emptiness. The knowledge they used to achieve this was forbidden. There is no other way to describe it. In the northern myths, Arceus granted purpose with a simple gesture. In the southern reality, purpose had to be seized. These alchemists learned to bind elemental spirits, to crystallize raw energy into a permanent physical form. They dared to hammer ice into intelligence, to smelt steel into sentience. They cracked the code of anima, the very breath of life, and forced it into granite lungs and copper veins. This was not a holy act performed in reverence. It was a theft of fire from the abstract concept of creation itself, and they did it with their own two hands in silence, deep underground. What resulted from this forbidden pursuit was the ultimate achievement of prehistoric engineering and magic. The Regice are not simply monsters to be caught. They are living engines, each one a solution to a specific physical problem. Regirock, with its body made of boulders packed and sealed with moss and clay, moves with a stability that defies its jagged appearance, a walking mountain held together by will. Regice, with its absolute zero interior, was a solution to the chaos of the climate itself, a block of frozen intention. Registeel, harder than any earthly substance, was forged from the metals of ancient meteorites, the stuff of stars hammered into a shield that could weather eternity. These are not accidents of nature. They are the pinnacle of a long and forgotten science, that perfectly merged raw magical force with material reality, a peak that humanity has never reached again. But the alchemists who built these titans did not survive to see them walk for long. Forbidden knowledge always carries a price, and the weight of their ambition was heavier than the stones they shaped. The tomes they used crumbled to dust, the secrets preserved only as braille patterns, carved into the very walls of the sealed chambers. The alchemists themselves faded completely from history, their names erased by the soil. They left behind their creations, locked in chambers that required specific keys to open, guardianship systems designed to test the worthy. They knew what they had made was too powerful to simply leave behind, but they also knew it was too magnificent to destroy, and so the giants slept, waiting for a master. The hubris of the alchemists did not destroy their world, but it did deliver an incredible tool into the hands of a man who knew exactly how to wield it. The titans were no longer the property of their creators. They became the property of a conqueror, a king who saw these walking engines and understood their true purpose. The story of how that man took the forbidden fire of the alchemists and turned it into the engine of an empire is exactly what we will uncover in the next chapter, the weapons of King Hoenn. The ancient smiths and alchemists of Hoenn achieved what many considered impossible. They gave life to stone, breath to ice, and a pulse to steel. But creation is a fragile moment. In the silence that followed the rituals, the newly awakened titans did not simply stand idle. They were powerful, primal, and utterly unique in all the world. And such power attracts only one kind of attention. It attracts the eye of the warlord. His name was not inherited from the land. He, the land. He was King Hoenn, and he lived in an age of endless war, a time when the ancient tribes of the region were locked in a constant struggle for survival and dominion. King Hoenn saw the endless conflict and recognized a truth that set him apart from every other chieftain and king of his era. He understood that to end all wars, one must possess a weapon that cannot be answered. The Regice were that answer. He did not ask the Titans for their allegiance. He did not negotiate with them. Using the same forbidden formulas and the same whispering of ancient commands discovered by the alchemists, he bound them to his will. This is the dark history that Hoenn lore often softens when told by firelight. The Regice were not partners in the great unification. They were instruments. They were slaves of war, their consciousness subjugated to the singular ruthless vision of a single human conqueror. The first of the Titans to march was Regirock. It was the battering ram of the kingdom. We must picture the ancient battlefields of Hoenn. The mud churned beneath 1,000 feet, the armies clashing with bronze and iron, and then the earth begins to tremble. Over the hill comes a figure of immense, shifting stones, its body composed of the very mountains that the army swore by. Regirock did not fight the armies. It marched them. Walls that had stood for generations crumbled to dust. Cavalry charges broke against its hide like waves against a cliff. It was not a soldier. It was a geological event. When the rivers provided refuge to the fleeing tribes, King Hoenn released Regice. The cold it generated was not natural. It was absolute. The great waterways of the region, the lifeblood of the resistance, were frozen solid in a single night. Regice patrolled the frozen corridors, its crystalline body refracting the moonlight. A silent, horrifying sentinel. There was no escape. There was no shelter. The world itself began to turn against the people, animated by the will of their king, and the screams of the dying were muffled by the howling of the snow. And then there was Registeel. It was the pillar holding up the entire terrible system. While Regirock smashed and Regice froze, Registeel provided the logistical spine of the conquest. It was impervious to every weapon the ancient world knew. Swords, arrows, fire, collapsing structures. Nothing could mar its metallic form. It stood guard over the conquered cities, a silent promise that the king's rule was permanent. Registeel was not a weapon of shock and awe. It was a weapon of occupation. It was the final nail in the coffin of freedom. This was the unification of Hoenn. It is often romanticized in the history books as the founding of a kingdom, the birth of a culture. But the truth, etched into the very rocks and caves where the Titans later hid, is that it was a breaking. The spirit of a region was broken by a man who wielded forces he could barely comprehend. King Hoenn did not create peace. He created an absence of war, a stillness born of terror. Yet the human will to resist is a stubborn flame. The most devastating conflict of the age did not come at the beginning of the conquest. It came at its peak. It came when King Hoenn turned his gaze upon the last free sanctuary, a city hidden in the mountains, a place called Setopolis in some of the oldest fragments of text, a city built within a volcanic caldera. The final battle was not a victory. It was an exorcism. The ancient battlefield, the name of which is now lost to the sea and the earth, was not a place of heroic duels. It was a slaughter. The Titans were unleashed in full, without restraint. Regirock collapsed the mountain passes, sealing the defenders inside their own city. Regis created a blizzard that lasted for a week, burying the hopes of the free city under a mile of impossible frost. Registeel marched into the center of the resistance and simply waited. The army broke itself against it. Arrows simply fell from the sky at its feet. Spears shattered. The resolve of the defenders shattered just as easily. The devastation was total. The land itself was scarred. The rocks twisted and blackened, the ice leaving a permafrost that never thawed, a cold that memory alone could not warm. This battlefield became a monument to fear. It was a message, but the message was received by everyone, including the very people King Hoenn swore to protect. They looked upon the battlefield, upon the smoking ruins and the frozen dead, and they no longer saw kings or enemies. They saw only the monsters, standing silently in the snow, waiting for their next command. The conquest was complete. Hoenn was unified, but it was a kingdom ruled by terror. King Hoenn had created the perfect weapon, but he had also created the perfect target for the world's hatred. The people did not just fear the Titans, they began to resent the king who brought them. The whispers grew into a storm. The silence of the battlefield was replaced by the murmuring of a deep conspiracy. How do you disarm a god king who commands the earth, the sky, and the sea? You turn his own creation against him. You find a way to bury the weapons so deep, behind puzzles and stone and ancient seals, that no warlord will ever find them again. And that story, the secret pact between the last of the free, the betrayal of the king, and the final desperate act of entombing the Titans away in their stone chambers, that is the legend of the Great Sealing. King Hoenn's conquest was complete. The three Titans had done exactly what they were built to do. They had crushed dissent, shattered fortresses, and unified the land under a single rule. But victory has a hollow sound when the instruments of your power are made of stone and ice and unfeeling steel. The war was over, but the Regice did not rest. They stood silently, awaiting orders that no one wanted to give anymore. The people looked at these golems, and for the first time, they did not see saviors or tools. They saw tyrants. They saw monsters that could not be reasoned with, could not be thanked, and could not be destroyed. This was the turning point where humanity began to fear their own creations. The very same hands that had shaped the Titans from rock and ice and metal now trembled at their presence. The king's court, the alchemists who had breathed life into these shells, the generals who had commanded them in battle, they all understood something deeply uncomfortable. They had built a cage for their enemies, but they were now living inside it with their jailers. The Regice were loyal only to their programming, and that programming had been designed for war. Without a war to fight, they were a standing judgment on the sins of their creators, a silent accusation carved from the very earth. The decision was not made quickly. It was not made lightly. It was a decision born from exhaustion, from the slow creeping realization that absolute power corrupts everything it touches, even the hands that wield it. The same terror that had inspired the creation of the Titans now demanded their absence. But you cannot destroy what cannot be killed. The alchemists knew this. The Regice were immortal constructs, their vitality tied to the raw elements of the planet itself. There was no forge hot enough to melt Registeel back into ore, no pressure great enough to crush Regirock back into sand, and no heat that could thaw the ancient heart of Regice. So the decision was made to lock the Titans away in eternal, lightless chambers. No windows, no sunlight, no sound from the outside world. They would be buried alive, in the deepest quiet the earth could offer, erased from the memory of the living. Now came the question of how. Moving a mountain of solid rock, a sentient glacier, and a living fortress of metal across a region was not a task for soldiers or labourers. It required a ritual, a careful and deeply dangerous manipulation of ancient commands. The logistical feat of spiriting the giants to remote, hidden locations became a feat of psychological warfare against the constructs themselves. They had to be tricked into stillness, seduced into sleep. The alchemists designed chambers that mirrored the Regice's own elemental nature perfectly. Regirock was led to a cave, filled with the same stone from which it was made, a place where it could feel the slow pulse of the earth and believe it had returned home. Regice was taken to a sunless grotto deep beneath the permafrost, where the cold was absolute and the stillness was endless. Registeel was entombed in a chamber built from iron and magnetite, a prison that whispered to its very atoms of silence and rest. They were not forced into their prisons. They were guided, they were coaxed, and when the final stone was rolled across the entrance of each chamber, the world held its breath. The light was gone, the warmth was gone, the Titans were sealed, and yet the alchemists could not bring themselves to simply let the secret die. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps it was a final warning to the future. They etched a message into the very walls of the central chamber, the antechamber that would guard the path to each of the three. A message not for the eyes of the king, not for the generals, but for the hands of a stranger. A pattern of raised dots arranged in precise sequences. A language that trusted only the careful touch of a seeker, not the greedy glance of a conqueror. They left a record of what they had done. A confession, a map, a warning. This is where the story in Hoenn becomes something else entirely. A puzzle carved in silence, a riddle whispered across the ages. What the alchemists left behind became known, by the few who could read it, as the language of the blind. The great sealing was complete. The three Titans were enclosed in their stone prisons, locked away from the world above. But the people did not simply walk away. They left a message, not in words that could be read aloud, not in symbols that could be seen by the eye, but in patterns of raised dots etched into the floor of the chamber, a language for the blind. This is the mystery of the sealed chamber. Why would the ancients choose a tactile language to guard their secrets? The answer is found in the darkness itself. The chamber was built to be lightless, a void where no torch could burn. Any visitor would have to navigate by touch alone, and so the message was written in Braille, a language that could be read in the absence of sight. The translation of those dots is simple but chilling. We feared it. We locked it away. These words are not a boast or a declaration of victory. They are a confession, an admission that the Regice, these beings of immense power, were objects of fear. They were locked away because they could not be controlled, because their existence threatened the world. The choice of Braille is significant. It reveals the mindset of those who performed the sealing. They understood that some truths are too terrible to be spoken aloud. They must be felt. The language of the blind is a language of touch, of intimacy. It requires a connection that goes beyond the visual. To read the message, one must reach out and touch the stone, to feel the patterns under their fingertips. This act of touch is a metaphor for the relationship between humanity and the Regice. The Titans are not just powerful beings, they are creations of human hands. The alchemists who formed them from rock and ice and steel knew them intimately. They shaped them, gave them life, and then they feared them. The Braille message is a reminder of that intimacy, that fear. The warning in the Braille is not just a historical note. It is a caution to all who seek the Regice. It says, Understand what you are dealing with. These are not tame creatures. They have been locked away for a reason. The fear that drove their sealing is still present, lingering in the darkness of the chamber. As you stand in that space, in the quiet and the silence, and you run your fingers over the braille, you are connecting with that history. The words become more than just text. They become a presence. The language of the blind speaks to the part of us that understands without seeing. It is a language that bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to instinct. In the darkness of the sealed chamber, truth is all that remains. This is why the ancients chose Braille. It is a language of humility, an acknowledgement that some knowledge cannot be captured in spoken words or grand inscriptions. It must be approached with patience, with a willingness to feel your way through the unknown. The Regis themselves embody this principle. They are silent, patient, waiting for those who are ready to understand. The Braille message is a bridge between the past and the present. It tells us that the Regis were not hidden out of malice, but out of necessity. The fear that inspired their sealing is a natural response to power that exceeds control. And yet by leaving this message, the ancients also left a door open. They placed the warning, but they also gave future generations a choice, to heed the warning or to seek the truth. As we prepare to enter the sealed chamber itself, we carry the weight of that choice. The language of the blind has spoken its piece. Now the chamber awaits, holding the answers to the questions we have yet to ask. It is a place of stillness and stone, where the past is preserved in silence, and it is there that the next piece of the story lies. You had just deciphered the message, left in the language of the blind, the tactile braille etched into stone. It was a warning, yes, but also an instruction. The sealed chamber was real, and it was waiting beneath the surface of Route 134. But to reach it, you would have to do more than read the words. You would have to become a part of the ancient equation. Route 134 is a stretch of ocean known for its relentless currents. In the games, the water churns with whirlpools and swift streams that push you off course. You need the Mac bike to navigate these currents, timing your sprints to avoid being swept away. But even that is only the beginning. The entrance to the sealed chamber is not a cave mouth you can see from the surface. It is a shadow in the depths, a crack in the ocean floor that only appears when you have the right pattern of movements. Divers and explorers in the Hoenn region have reported strange anomalies here. A persistent cold current that seems to emanate from below, a faint humming that vibrates through the water. Those who have ventured too close speak of a pressure that feels less like water and more like the weight of centuries pressing against your chest. To find the entrance, you must first find the correct spot. A pattern of stones on the seafloor, arranged in a circle, marks the location. It is almost invisible unless you know what to look for. The Braille message you uncovered in the earlier chapters told you exactly where to dive, and so you descend, following the current as it pulls you downward into a darkness that swallows all light. The atmosphere of the deep-sea tomb is unlike anything else in the Pokémon world. No Pokémon cry reaches this depth. No sunlight pierces the gloom. Only the sound of your own breathing and the distant thrum of something mechanical or organic that you cannot place. The walls of the cavern are slick with algae and barnacles, but as your eyes adjust, you see the carvings. More Braille, but these are not warnings. These are the instructions for a ritual that has not been performed in millennia. You stand before two massive stone doors, each one as tall as a building, covered in symbols that predate any known human language. The doors are sealed not by locks or magic, but by a riddle locked in the very fabric of the Pokémon world. To open them, you must bring two specific creatures to this chamber, Wailord and Relicanth. Why these two? One is the largest Pokémon known to exist in the Hoenn region, a leviathan of the deep that can reach lengths of nearly 50 feet. The other is an ancient fish that has survived unchanged for over 100 million years, a living fossil that carries the memory of a time before the continents drifted apart. The ritual requires that you place Wailord at the front of your party and Relicanth at the back. This order is deliberate. Wailord represents the vastness of the ocean, a great whale that once carried the souls of the drowned. Relicanth represents time itself, a creature that has watched the world change and remained still. When you stand before the doors with these two in proper alignment, you must read the final Braille inscription aloud, or in the games, simply interact with the stone. The doors groan and the water around you begins to stir. The significance of this pairing is profound. Wailord, the floatwell Pokémon, is the embodiment of the surface. The sky above the sea, the boundary between air and water. Relicanth, the longevity Pokémon, is the embodiment of the depths, the abyss where light never reaches. Together, they span the entire vertical axis of the ocean world. You are telling the chamber that you understand the balance between above and below, between the present and the ancient past. Only then does the door consent to open. And when it does, the sound is not a crash but a whisper. The stone grinds against stone with a slow, deliberate motion, as if the mountain itself is sighing. The water pours into the chamber beyond, carrying you with it. You emerge into a vast hall carved from living rock. Pillars rise like frozen waves, each one etched with a history no one has ever fully deciphered. The temperature drops. The air is dry and still, despite being underwater. It is a place that has not been touched by sunlight or human breath in longer than any recorded civilization. The weight of centuries of silence presses down on you. Every footstep echoes. The braille on the walls tells a story, but not a kind one. It describes the imprisonment of three beings: Regirock, Regice, and Registeel, and the precautions taken to ensure they would never be freed by the careless. The message also mentions a fourth entity, one that lies deeper still, waiting in a chamber beneath this one. But that is a mystery for another time. For now, you stand in the sealed chamber itself. The air smells of salt and rust. The only light comes from the faint bioluminescence of creatures that have evolved in absolute darkness. You feel watched. You are. The Titans know you are here. And yet, for all your preparation, the chamber still holds its secrets. The doors to the Titans themselves are not here. No, this is only the antechamber. The real trials lie scattered across the region, in the desert ruins and in the island cave. That is where you will need to go next, to complete the puzzle. And finally, stand before the ancient golems, who have been sleeping since the world was young. And so, after deciphering the braille, after swimming through the dark currents of Route 134, after finding that silent chamber beneath the waves, you stood before three doors. But opening the sealed chamber was only the beginning. That place was not a prison, it was a map, a key, a puzzle that whispered the locations of three separate tombs, scattered across the Hoenn region, each one a world away from the others. And it is those tombs we must now enter. The desert ruins, the island cave, the ancient tomb. Three names that sound like lines from a forgotten epic. Three places where the earth, the ocean, and the sky seem to hold their breath. Tonight, we descend into the first two, the prison of Regirock and the prison of Regice. But understand this, these are not just caves you walk into, they are riddles carved into the landscape, designed to test not your strength, but your patience, your willingness to read the world around you. Because the Titans did not want to be found. The desert ruins lie in the far west of Hoenn, buried in a sea of sand that shifts with every wind. Travelers tell stories of a strange formation, a low, square structure half swallowed by the dunes, its walls made of stone that seems older than the mountains. No windows, no doors visible from the outside, just a single seam in the rock, barely wide enough to slip a hand through, and a set of depressions in the floor that look like nothing more than accidental cracks. But those cracks are not random. They are a script for the blind. If you stand inside the desert ruins at the right moment, when the sun is high and the shadow of the entrance falls, just so, you can trace the braille inscriptions with your fingertips. They tell you what to do, but the message is incomplete on its own. you must have witnessed the sealed chamber first. You must have carried that knowledge across the sea, because the true ritual requires you to step outside the ruins into the open desert and stand before a very specific stone. This is where the environment becomes the puzzle. The creators of these prisons did not trust locks and keys. They trusted nature itself. To summon Regirock, you must find a rock that stands alone among the shifting dunes. A rock that looks like it was placed there by a giant hand. And then, you must use a move that changes the very weather. In the games, it is the move strength. But lore tells us that the ancient alchemists used something deeper. They used the weight of the world. They pushed that stone until it groaned, till the sand beneath it trembled, till the desert ruins themselves began to shudder. And then, and only then, would the prison's heart awaken. Regirock does not come gently. It emerges from the stone floor of the ruins, as if it were always there, just waiting to be remembered. Its body is a mosaic of boulders and pebbles, held together by some invisible force. Some say it is held together by will, others say by regret, but what no one can deny is the sheer age of the creature. Regirock is the Stone Age made flesh. Every crack in its surface is a memory of a time when humanity used flint and fire, when the world was raw and unshaped. To stand before it is to stand before the dawn of craft. Now leave that desert. Sail east across the warm waters of Hoenn to a tiny island so small it barely has a name. On that island, there is a cave. Not a grand cavern, not a yawning mouth of rock, just a slot in the cliff, low and dark, as if the sea had carved it by accident. This is the island cave, and unlike the desert ruins, which hide their entrance in plain sight, the island cave is almost impossible to find unless you know exactly where to look. The waters around it are shallow and treacherous. The currents pull at your boat. The fog rolls in without warning, and the cave itself, when you finally crouch to enter, smells of salt and cold and something else, something that makes your breath catch in your throat. Inside the island cave is nearly empty. A single pool of water sits in the center, fed by some underground spring. The walls are smooth, polished by centuries of moisture, and on the floor, more braille. This message tells a different story. It commands you to, but you have no ice here. Not yet. The cave is warm, humid, alive with the sound of dripping. The puzzle is not to freeze the pool. It is to change the environment around you. And for that, you need the power of a Pokémon who knows the move Rock Smash, or something that can break the very stones that hold the cave together. But that is only the first step. The true summoning of Regice requires you to wait, to stand in the center of the cave and read a different kind of braille, not carved in stone, but written in the air. You must walk around the cave in a specific pattern, circling the pool 1.5 times, then stopping exactly where the shadow of the entrance falls. This is not a test of strength. It is a test of patience, of faith, of understanding that some things can only be summoned by stillness. And then the water begins to freeze, not because you used an ice move, but because the very air around you turns cold. The temperature drops as if the cave itself is exhaling winter. The pool hardens into a sheet of clear blue ice, and beneath it a shape stirs. Regice rises through that frozen lens, its body a perfect crystal of ancient ice, with a core of swirling cold that seems to pulse like a heartbeat. It is the Ice Age given form, the memory of glaciers that once covered the land, grinding mountains into dust, because that is what Regice represents. Not just cold, but the immense, slow power of time. Ice that does not melt. Ice that remembers when the world was young and the seas were ferocious. The isolation of these locations is not accidental. The desert ruins and the island cave were chosen because they are places where time itself moves slowly. In the desert, the ruins are preserved by dryness, by heat, by the endless cycle of sand burying and uncovering. Nothing decays there. Nothing changes. The same wind that scoured the stone 1,000 years ago still blows today. In the island cave, the cold springs and the constant moisture create a kind of natural cryogenic chamber. The ice that Regice sleeps in is not the same water that falls from the sky. It is water that has been trapped since the last ice age, preserved in the darkness, untouched by the sun, and that is the key to understanding these prisons. The alchemists and smiths who built them did not just want to contain the Titans, they wanted to preserve them, to keep them from changing, from being corrupted by the world. They placed Regirock in a tomb of eternal drought, where no rain could soften its stone. They placed Regice in a tomb of eternal cold, where no heat could thaw its heart, and they left the instructions in Braille, a language that does not rely on sight, because they knew that the guardians of these secrets would need to feel their way through the dark. But there is a third tomb, a place where the earth, the ice, and the steel meet in a single chamber, a prison that has not been opened in living memory, and the puzzles there are stranger still, involving whispers and echoes and the sound of metal striking stone. But that is a story for another night. For now, let the desert wind die down. Let the ice settle back into stillness. Tomorrow, we will open the third door and step into the ancient tomb of steel. From the shifting sands of the desert ruins and the frozen stillness of the island cave, the journey of the ancient seal takes a distinctly different turn. You leave the cracked earth and the glacial stone behind, ascending into the Hoenn Highlands. The air changes. It thins. The wind carries no grit, no moisture. Instead, there is a quiet pressure in the atmosphere itself, a hum that sits at the edge of hearing. The path leads to a crevice, a gash in the rock forged not by water or wind, but by an ancient impact, a wound in the earth that was deliberately hidden. And within that crevice lies the third and final prison of the original triad, the ancient tomb of steel. This chamber stands apart from its brethren in a way that is immediately felt. The ruins of Regirock are porous and weathered, crumbling back into the desert from which they were formed. The island cave is brittle and crystalline, a structure of frozen pressure that could shatter, but the Troy of steel rejects decay entirely. It is not worn. It does not crumble. The walls are smooth, unyielding, impossibly cold to the touch. This is a space built from metallic ore, used by a heat so intense it left the inner surfaces gleaming with a dull, milled shine. The air tastes of iron and static. The very act of stepping across the threshold changes the acoustics of the world. The unique properties of the Registeel chamber in the Hoenn Highlands are defined by resonance. Every footfall is amplified and scattered by the geometry of the walls. Every breath echoes against the curved plates, is a tomb that listens. The ancient builders understood that steel is a conductor, not just of heat or electricity, but of vibration. They constructed this prison as a drum. The metallic resonance of the tomb is its primary defense, a constant, subtle frequency that permeates the entire structure. It is not a sound you hear so much as a pressure you feel in the bones. The floor plates are tuned to specific tones. To walk across them carelessly is to announce your presence to the sleeper within. The entire chamber hums with a note that has not changed in millennia, a note that says only one thing: endure. The finality of the seal here is absolute. The rituals for Regirock and Regice required specific environmental triggers, a test of endurance against heat and cold. But the Tomb of Steel demands a different kind of threshold. The braille etched into the polished walls commands absolute silence. It demands that the seeker wait. The difficulty of the awakening ritual for the Titan of Steel is not found in navigating a labyrinth or defeating a guardian. It is found in the weight of the stillness. The seal was designed to be forgotten. The key is not a movement or a word. It is a state of being. To stand in the center of that chamber, surrounded by the humming metal, and to hold still long enough for the lock to align. It is a test of faith against the very nature of time. The tomb does not wish to be opened. It has accepted its role as the final resting place of the Iron Age, and it will not yield to force. It will only yield to absolute stillness. Consider the material itself. Steel is not born from the earth in the same way stone or ice is. It is processed. It is purified. It is shaped by will. This chamber was not merely excavated. It was constructed. Sheets of ancient iron and alloys, we can no longer name were layered and fused, creating a Faraday cage against the noise of the living world. The atmosphere inside is inorganic, sterile. The silence here is not the silence of a cave, which is full of the sound of dripping water and the distant scurry of life. The silence here is a perfect void, a deep well of pressure that presses against the ears. This is the metallic resonance of the tomb, a frequency that discourages life, a song of stone and ore. This resistance to decay is more than a physical property, it is a theological statement. Registeel was created to be the unmoving keystone of the Titan army. Its purpose was endurance. To seal it permanently, the ancient alchemists had to build a prison that matched that purpose. They built a tomb that was equally stubborn. The rock of Regirock crumbles under the rain. The ice of Regice melts under the sun. But the steel of this Titan waits in the dark, untouched by the elements, holding its shape against the slow erosion of the world. The seal is a monument to the hubris of the creators. They crafted a vessel that could not be destroyed, and then they had to build a box that could hold it. The finality of the seal carries a heavy weight. Imagine the builders of ancient Hoenn. They had crafted a perfect weapon, a body that could not be cut, an arm that could not be broken. But when the time came to lock it away, they had to create a prison that was as strong as its contents. The difficulty of the awakening ritual reflects the guilt of those who wielded it first. They designed the puzzle to be nearly impossible. You must know the language of the blind. You must understand the patterns of the stars. You must carry the secret sign of the ancient kings. And even then the tomb resists. The doors grind against the weight of the mountain. The slab that blocks the inner sanctum is a physical declaration of permanence. This is not a temporary slumber. This is an exile designed to last until the mountains themselves have eroded. The chamber is a closed fist. It does not breathe. It does not change. The resonance is the only sign of life, a deep, repeating note that travels through the steel of the walls and into the bedrock of the highlands. For generations, the tomb was simply a feature of the landscape, a sealed cave that no living creature entered. The ritual remained unperformed. The braille remained unread. The Titans slept in the humming dark, wrapped in a layer of iron that would take a deliberate act of will to penetrate. But time has a way of eroding even the most absolute of decisions. The seal held for centuries. The brass tarnished. The knowledge faded from living memory. The tomb of steel sat in the silence of the highlands, an unread book waiting for eyes that could decipher it. And perhaps it should have remained that way, a chapter closed on the age of metal. But the discovery of the other tombs in Hoenn and the eventual arrival of explorers carrying a deeper understanding of the ancient texts would prove that the seals were not immune to discovery. The echoes of that metallic resonance travelled across oceans and generations, eventually reaching a frozen frontier far to the north, a place where the ground held secrets even older than the highlands of Hoenn, a place where the final resting place of the Master was hidden, waiting beneath the frost. The crown Tundra held a different kind of silence, and its discovery was only just beginning. The metallic resonance of the ancient tomb in Hoenn's highlands faded slowly, like a bell struck once and left to vibrate for centuries. That chamber, forged of rust and patience, held Registeel in perfect stillness, its steel body resting in a silence so deep it seemed to have become part of the mountain itself. But the story of the Titans does not end with those three sealed doors. Far to the north, across an ocean and a continent, lies a frozen peninsula where the earth itself holds a secret older than any human kingdom. And there, beneath the permafrost of Galar's southernmost reach, two more Titans slumbered, unknown to all but the oldest of legends. The Crown Tundra is a place of perpetual winter, a land where the sun barely clears the horizon in the deepest months, and where the wind carries the scent of ancient ice. It is a region that feels untouched by time, its mountains worn smooth by glaciers that have advanced and retreated for millions of years. And it was here, in the shadow of a great peak called the Crown Shrine, that explorers first uncovered evidence of something far older than the stone circles of Hoenn or the Temple of Snowpoint, a set of ruins buried under 1,000 years of frost, with walls carved in patterns that matched no known language. But the symbols were not entirely unfamiliar. They were the same dots and bumps that had guarded the sealed chamber, the same tactile script left by a civilization that understood the value of silence. When the ruins of the crowned tundra were finally breached, the world discovered that Regice had created not 3, but 5 children. 2 more titans had been crafted, then hidden away in a corner of the world so remote that even the memory of them had been forgotten. Their names were Regieleki and Regidrago, and they represented ages of human history that the original trio had never touched. If Regirock was the Stone Age, Regis the Ice Age, and Registeel the Iron Age, then these new titans were the Age of Electricity and the Dark Ages, respectively. They were the next steps in the progression of human mastery over the elements, forged by the same ancient hands, but for purposes the old legends never recorded. Regieleki is unlike any other titan. It is not made of stone or ice or metal. Its body is nothing but pure, concentrated electric energy, held in a form by forces we still do not understand. In the crowned tundra, it was found within a set of cylindrical pillars, each one a conduit for the lightning that must have once surged through the tundra's sky. When awakened, Regieleki moves faster than light itself, its form flickering like a phantom, leaving trails of static in the air. Some researchers believe it was created to power an ancient civilization's great machines, a living generator that could run forever. But others whisper that Regieleki was never meant to be useful. It was meant to be feared. Because if the Stone Age taught humanity to shape rock, and the Iron Age taught us to forge metal, the Age of Electricity taught us that there are forces in nature that can never be controlled, only channeled for a moment before they burn through everything. And then there is Regidrago, the most enigmatic of all the titans. Its form is a single, enormous dragon's head, suspended in a crystalline cage of its own making. The lore says that when Regice attempted to create a titan from crystallized dragon energy, it ran out of the rare material before completing the body. All that remained was the head, a massive, Maw-like structure that still contains the raw power of dragon-type energy, but without the limbs or torso to wield it fully. Regidrago is a fragment of a larger plan, a creature born from an honest failure, and yet, in that incompleteness, there is a profound melancholy. It represents the dark ages of human history, a time when knowledge was lost, when the great works of the ancients crumbled into myth, and when the only thing left was the memory of what could have been. The dragon's head is all that survived, a symbol of decay and resilience intertwined. How do these new titans fit into the established timeline of human ages? The answer lies in the expansion of the original concept. The 3 titans of Hoenn marked the earliest stages of civilization, the shaping of stone, the survival through ice, the mastery of metal. But humanity did not stop there. We learned to harness electricity, and we endured the dark ages of war and superstition. Regieleki and Regidrago are the next chapters in that same story, added to the tapestry by the same creator, Regice, perhaps as a warning or a promise. They show that progress is not linear. Every age of innovation is followed by an age of forgetting. Every burst of light casts a shadow. The crowned tundra discovery also raises a troubling question. If Regice created 5 children, why were only 3 sealed in Hoenn? Why were these 2 hidden so far away, in a land that no ancient civilization ever called home? Some believe that the seal of the original 3 was a punishment, a reaction to the fear of their power. But the placing of Eleki and Drago in the crowned tundra was not a punishment, it was a preservation. They were not locked away in anger, but stored in safety, like heirlooms kept in a distant vault. Perhaps Regice knew that one day the world would need to remember the ages of electricity and darkness, and it placed them where the ice would guard them until the right time came. That time has arrived. As we stand in the frozen ruins of the crowned tundra, looking at the pillars that hold Regieleki, and the crystalline cage that holds Regidrago. We are witnessing the expansion of a myth that began in the deep waters of Hoenn. The story of the Titans is not finished. It never was. There are always more ages to discover, more layers of human history waiting to be carved into the form of a golem. And in the next chapter, we will turn our attention to the age represented by Regieleki, the age that changed everything, the age that still hums in the wires above our heads, the age of electricity. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. The Crown Tundra is a land of bitter cold and ancient secrets. We followed the traces of forgotten history to 2 new prisons, 2 new shrines cut into the frozen earth. One of them hummed with a frequency the others did not. It was not the deep resonance of stone, the quiet creak of ice, or the solid ring of steel. It was a high, constant thrum, like a live wire suspended in the dark. The moment the seal cracked, the very air began to tremble. This was Regieleki, a creature composed of pure, high-voltage energy, locked away at the edge of the world and waiting for the modern age to find it. There are no materials holding Regieleki together. No chunks of rock, no frozen lakes, no scrap metal. It is an entity of pure potential, raw electrical fury given a physical form. The ancient texts of the Hoenn ruins describe a clear progression. Humanity moved from the first stone tools to the shelter against the environment, to the strength of forged metal under the hammer. But what comes after the mastery of materials? Regieleki answers that question. It is a being from a new chapter of history, one we are still living through right now. It is the spark in the wire, the sudden flash in the storm, a creature composed of pure high-voltage energy, and it is practically untamable by any force short of divinity. And this is where the lore takes a fascinating turn, a shift in perspective that changes how we view the entire lineage. The theory that Regieleki represents the modern industrial revolution is not simply a clever piece of thematic design. It appears to be the core of its identity. Regirock is the primal dawn of humanity. Regice is the deep survival instinct against the cold. Registeel is the age of smelting and forging. But Regieleki is the age of connection, the age of the power grid, the sudden, world-altering speed of lightning flowing through copper wires across entire continents. It represents the exact moment humanity stopped merely shaping materials and started harnessing the fundamental forces of the universe, the moment the world lit up. The theory that Regieleki represents the modern industrial revolution places it firmly in our own timeline, a direct reflection of the power that drives our modern lives. If Regieleki is the Industrial Revolution, then it is a revolution that had to be strictly controlled. Look closely at its form, the black rings, the stoppers on its body, the regulation chambers. This is the insulating equipment placed on its body by ancient people to limit its power. They built a cage around the lightning itself. They knew, whoever these ancient craftsmen were, that letting it run at full speed would be catastrophic. The insulating equipment placed on its body by ancient people to limit its power is the only thing standing between the world and an energy unspeakable. It is a reminder that every great leap forward comes with a mechanism to keep it in check. But in the same frozen caverns, a different kind of presence remained behind. It did not crackle with the lightning of the modern world. It was ancient, incomplete, and utterly silent. While Regieleki is the expression of pure energy and the progress of mankind, this other titan is a fragment of a story that was left unfinished. A head without a body, a dragon that was never quite formed. The silence in its chamber is heavy with the weight of a broken creation, a creature cut short before it could ever truly exist. This is exactly where our path leads next, into the lore of the one who is incomplete, the mystery of a project abandoned before its time, the story of the unfinished dragon. The age of electricity hummed with a terrifying, perfect energy. Regieleki was a god of pure voltage, a circuit brought to life, but in the shadow of that brilliance, In the cold of the crown tundra, another temple waited. It did not buzz. It did not hum. It mourned. Regice, the original creator, had a plan for a fifth titan. It was to be the apex, the dragon, and it almost worked. Almost. Regidrago is the tragic story of the dragon's head Pokémon. It is not a being of complete construction. It is a tragedy carved in stone and bound by crystallized dragon energy. There is a somberness to this titan that the others lack. Regirock is a fortress of ancient endurance. Regis is a perfect frozen gem of absolute zero. Registeel is an indomitable engine of the Iron Age. Regice is pure untamed force given shape. But Regidrago is a question, a what if, an echo of a shout that was never fully released. It floats not out of levitation, derived from a complete power source, but from the desperate attempt of an incomplete life to simply remain in existence. The lore tells us that Regice forged the Titans from the raw elements of the newly formed world: stone, ice, steel. For the fourth, it worked with pure electric energy, freezing voltage into a solid frame. But for the fifth, it sought a much rarer substance. It sought the crystallized dragon energy. This is not the power of a single dragon like Rayquaza or Dragonite. This is the primordial essence of the draconic type itself, the raw material that predates the very concept of dragons. Regice gathered it, shaping it into a container, a head, a core, but the supply in the ancient world was finite. The crystal mines ran deep, but they were not bottomless. Regice ran out of crystallized dragon energy during the creation process. Halfway through the construction of the fifth titan, the rivers of draconic power dried up. The forge went cold. The master was left with a head, a neck, a single spark of life, but no body to house it. Imagine the frustration, the power, the unfulfilled purpose. It is a testament to the sheer potency of what was already formed that the head lived. The incomplete vessel drew a breath. The eyes opened, and Regidrago came into being, not as the apex but as the fragment. Where Regice is a perfect circuit, a closed loop of energy, Regidrago is a broken chain. And this leads us to the terrifying potential of what Regidrago would have been if completed. Consider the implication carefully. If this is what the head of a creature built on crystallized dragon energy can do, what would the full body have been capable of? Its signature move, dragon energy, fires the very power that is its body. It is a final, desperate measure, a creature burning the last of its incomplete fuel to fight. It is a self-consuming legend. A completed Regidrago would not be a legend, it would be an apocalypse. It would have been the ultimate draconic entity, a perfect, eternal dragon that could stand against the masters of time and space. Instead, it is a fragment, a haunting monument to the hubris of creation and the limits of the world. This incompleteness defines its era. It is the embodiment of a period caught between the glory of what was and the promise of what could be. The period of history Regice was trying to represent when it forged. This titan was a time of arrested development, a time when the empires of the past had fallen and the light of the Renaissance had not yet crested the horizon. Regidrago sits there, in its temple in the crown tundra, the crown of its head facing the sky, waiting for a completion that may never be written. Its story is one of cessation, a fire that was never fully lit. But what of the era it represents so perfectly? 1,000 years of history lie between the fall of one reality and the dawn of another, a period of myth, of knights, of plagues, and of secrets buried deep in the soil of the continent. The very structure of the Regi legend reflects a specific, beautiful, and terrifying epoch. We will sit with that epoch next. The Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, a time where the story was paused, a long night, waiting for a dawn that might only be found by the listener who joins us for the next part of this journey. But for now, let the quiet hum of the incomplete dragon fill your mind. The crystal glows, holding the potential of a world that might have been, safe in the silence of the ancient tundra. The unfinished dragon, Regidrago. We left off considering its tragedy, a creature of immense potential abruptly halted because Regice ran out of crystallized dragon energy. But perhaps this incompleteness is not merely an accident of construction. Perhaps it is the most perfect expression of the age it was meant to represent. The Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. This is where the Regi timeline takes its most curious turn. The sequence so far feels almost geological. Regirock for the Stone Age, when the world was raw and solid. Regice for the Ice Age, when the climate itself was a weapon. Registeel for the Iron Age, when humanity learned to forge the earth into tools and weapons. But what comes after the Iron Age? You might expect the Age of Electricity, the logical endpoint of an industrial revolution, the final step in a march towards mechanics and efficiency. But the timeline inserts a pause, a ghost story, a legend, the dragon. Regidrago is the missing link between the world of function and the world of electricity, and what it represents is the era of myth, knights, and dragon lore. The Middle Ages were a time when the world was not yet fully understood. The maps were full of monsters, the forests were dark and dangerous, and the highest ideal was the knight, a warrior encased in steel, but animated by a code of chivalry, a spiritual quest, a belief in something beyond the material. Does that sound familiar? Registeel is the shell, the armor, the Iron Maiden. Regidrago is the spirit inside the helmet, the breath in the armor, the dragon the knight was born to face or to become. To map Regidrago to this era is to understand that the dragon is not an enemy to progress. It is the soul of the pre-modern world, a world of alchemy and quests, where the Grail was always just out of reach. Regidrago is the head of that Grail legend, the trophy brought back from the edge of the known world. The crystallized dragon energy was the substance of myth itself, and Regice ran out of it. The implication is terrifying and beautiful. The machine that built the Titans ran out of magic. It could not finish the story of the Dragon Age, and this matches what happened in our own history. The Iron Age gave way to the Dark Ages, a period of fragmentation and folklore, and then came the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Age of Electricity. Regieleki is the final form, pure energy, no body, no myth, just current flowing through a circuit. But the transition between the two, between Registeel and Regieleki, is a void, a blackout, and that void is the Dark Ages. That void is Regidrago. What are the missing links in the Regi timeline? We have the raw materials, we have the creator, we have the modern endpoint, but what connects the creature of steel to the creature of sparks? The missing link is the dragon. It is the story. It is the human element. The Regi timeline is not just a history of materials. It is a history of consciousness, how the world perceived itself. In the Stone Age, the world was a solid fact. In the Ice Age, it was a frozen threat. In the Iron Age, it was a tool to be mastered. In the Dark Ages, it was a mystery to be revered. In the Age of Electricity, it is a network to be connected. Regidrago represents the last gasp of the mystical worldview before the world went electric. It is the guardian at the gate, the sentinel of the old world. Its very body is a contradiction. It is a fragment, a leftover, a living fossil of a mindset that believed the world was ruled by dragons and destiny. Look closely at its design. It is not a full body. It is a head, a weapon, an icon. Just as the medieval knight carried a banner, or a relic, or a crest, Regidrago is a symbol, a piece of the age of faith. The sealed chamber in Hoenn, the frozen temple in Sinnoh, the crown tundra in Galar, these are not just prisons. They are museums. They are time capsules. And rushing through the timeline from Regirock to Regieleki, we risk missing the significance of the pause. Regidrago forces the timeline to stop, to remember that before the light bulb, there was the campfire. Before the power plant, there was the forge. And before the digital screen, there was the stained glass window telling the story of a dragon. This is what the missing links represent. A bridge made of story, a connection built of belief. And this brings us to a profound tension. The lore of the Regice splits here. It is a fork in the road of myth. Is Regidrago the last of an old line, or the first of a new one? Is it a failure of Regice, or a deliberate farewell to magic? The answer dictates everything we think we know about the Titans. Which brings us to the exact point of divergence, the moment when the story must declare its allegiance to one origin story over another. Up next is Chapter 25, the Split Decision. And so it was, in the age of myth and dragon lore, that the world stood on the precipice of a great turning. The Iron Age had given way to something new, a flicker then a surge of raw, untamed energy. The crown Tundra, that frozen expanse at the southern tip of Galar, held not one, but two final creations from the hands of Regice. But there was a catch, a riddle etched into the very stone of the temple. You could not have both. You could not walk away with the speed of the storm and the weight of the dragon's heart in the same timeline. The temple itself was a masterwork of contradiction. Its entrance, a single towering pillar of ice and rock, stood alone against the perpetual twilight of the tundra. Inside, the walls hummed with a low, steady vibration, not the echo of metal from Registeel's chamber, but something electric, something almost alive. Two pedestals rested at the center of the main hall, each one carved with a different symbol, a jagged bolt for one, a coiled serpent for the other, and between them, a single inscription in the ancient Braille script that had guided so many before. This was no mere puzzle, it was a philosophical lock. Regice had built its children to represent eras, to embody the progression of human civilization, but with Regieleki and Regidrago, it had reached a fork in the road, a split that could not be mended. On one side, pure unbridled speed, a creature of lightning that could outpace thought itself, whose body was a prison of electric energy, held together by will alone. On the other, the raw draconic power of a nearly finished soul, a head without a body, a dragon's cry without a voice. Both were incomplete in their own way, both were perfect in their purpose. The impossibility of holding both in a single timeline wasn't a technical limitation of the games or the lore, it was a narrative truth. The temple's magic ensured that once you placed a single orb into one pedestal, the other path would crumble, sealed by an unseen force. Some say it was Regice's final lesson, that every age must end to make way for another, that you cannot live in the lightning and the legend at the same moment. To embrace the future is to let go of the past. To hold the dragon's head is to deny the machine. Inside the chamber, the air grew heavy with choice. The electric orb, when held, felt weightless, almost nauseatingly light, as if it might slip through your fingers and vanish into the snow. The dragon orb, by contrast, was a dense, warm stone, pulsing with a slow, ancient heartbeat. One promised the speed of a world transformed by industry. Factories humming, wires crackling, the birth of the modern age. The other promised the memory of a time when knights rode through mist and dragons cast shadows over castles. It was the difference between the future and the past, between motion and memory, and yet the temple did not make the decision for you. It simply waited, patient as the glaciers, while you stood there, one foot on the threshold of an electric dawn, the other in the twilight of a dragon's dream. The ancient builders of Galar, or perhaps Regice itself, understood something profound, that the greatest power any being could possess was the power to choose, and that choice itself was a form of creation. By selecting one, you were completing a story. By leaving the other, you were consigning it to silence, to sleep, to the waiting dark of a sealed chamber that would not open again until the world had forgotten that other path existed. So you made your choice, and the temple responded. The pedestal you touched sank into the floor with a grinding sound, and the other rose slightly, then stopped, as if bowing in defeat. A low hum grew into a roar, and from the chosen pedestal a figure began to coalesce, either a brilliant crackling sphere of electricity that took the shape of a giant, or a massive serpentine head made of crystal and cyan energy, its empty eye sockets staring without sight. The one you did not choose simply faded, its pedestal turning to dust, the symbol of its age erased from the wall as if it had never been. And that, perhaps, is the most haunting part of the Crown Tundra Temple. Not what you gain, but what you lose. You will never know the other Regi in this timeline. You will never feel the rush of its power or hear the whisper of its ancient name. The temple ensures that your story is singular, that your journey is unique. It forces you to live with the weight of that split decision forever. Now, as the temple settles into its new silence, the chosen titan stands before you, whether lightning or legend, and you wonder about the one left behind. What becomes of a Regi that is never called? Does it dream in its sealed chamber, waiting for some other world, some other trainer, some other time? Or does it simply cease to exist, its potential folded back into the raw elements of the crown tundra? The lore does not say. The temple does not answer. It only holds its breath and waits. And in that waiting, you begin to sense something deeper, something mechanical, almost soul-like, hidden beneath the ice. A presence that does not sleep, but thinks. A rhythm that is not of stone or energy, but of something that remembers being alive. But that is a story for another night. A story that will emerge when we finally turn our gaze to what lies beneath the surface of the Titan's silent heart. And so, after making that impossible choice in the Crown Tundra, after locking one of the two new Titans away, behind a door you could never open again, a strange silence settles in. You stand in the chamber with your prize, either a creature of pure, crackling electricity, or a dragon's head frozen in mid-roar. And you realize something unsettling about both of them. They move with purpose, but there is no breath, no heartbeat, no pulse of blood or rhythm of lungs. They are golems, built from the ground up, assembled rather than born. And this is where we must look deeper into the very soul of what the Regi truly are. Think about the ability that defines the original three. Clear body. It is a passive power, one that prevents any external force from lowering their stats. In the games, that means no intimidate, no charm, no scary face can weaken them. But in the lore, that ability takes on a far more profound meaning. A biological organism, a creature of flesh and bone, is vulnerable to change, to disease, to the slow decay of age. But a golem is fixed, immutable, its parameters set at the moment of creation. Clear body is not a simple battle perk, it is a statement of design. The Regice cannot be diminished because they were never meant to grow. They were programmed, not nurtured. There is no stomach inside Regirock, no liver inside Regice, no nervous system threading through Registeel's metallic limbs. They are hollow shells, animated by a force we still do not fully understand. Some legends say Regice breathed life into them like a craftsman igniting a forge. Others claim it used elemental cores, shards of its own power, as the engine for each titan. Either way, the lack of biology is stark. You can see it when they move. The deliberate, mechanical gait, the way their joints lock and release with no fluidity. They are not organic, they are constructs. And that makes them both awe-inspiring and deeply alien. Now consider their cry. Every Pokémon has a unique vocalization, a sound that often mirrors its nature. The Regi's cry, however, is not a cry at all. It is a series of beeps, digital, tonal, arrhythmic. It sounds like a machine communicating, like a piece of ancient clockwork reporting its status. When Regirock roars, you hear the grinding of stone against stone, but also a high-pitched electronic pulse. When Regice speaks, it hums like a refrigerator cycling on, cold and sterile. Registeel's cry is a percussive clash of metal followed by a low-frequency drone. And Regieleki, its sound is pure static, a crackling hiss of voltage. Regidrago's cry is the most organic of the group. Yet it too is punctuated by a strange warbling tone, as if the dragon energy it's made of is being filtered through a speaker. This consistency across all 6 titans is no accident. It suggests a shared origin, a common blueprint. They were not born from eggs, not raised in a nest, not influenced by environment or diet. They were constructed from raw materials: rock, ice, steel, electricity, crystallized dragon energy, and given a single voice, a single method of expression. That voice is a sequence of beeps. It is the sound of a program running, the sound of a soul that was never alive in the way we understand life. And so we arrive at the idea of the Regi as the ultimate golems. Golems appear in folklore across the world. A clay figure brought to life by a word of power, a wooden effigy animated by a hidden scroll, a bronze statue that moves only when the moon is full. What makes a golem distinct from a natural creature is that it lacks free will. It follows its instructions to the letter, no more, no less. The Regi are the same. In the ancient texts of Hoenn, they were created as weapons for a king. They were programmed with commands to destroy, to protect, to seal themselves away, and they obeyed without question for millennia. In the mythology of Sinnoh, they were crafted by Regice to shape the world, pulling continents, freezing oceans, hammering mountains. They were tools, not children. This is why the concept of a mechanical soul is so fitting. A soul implies something eternal, something that survives the body. But what if the soul itself is a program? What if the Regi's consciousness is a set of instructions that cannot be rewritten, only followed? Then the clear body ability is not just a shield against stat reduction. It is a lock on the very nature of their being. They cannot be corrupted, cannot be made weaker, because they are already as pure as their code allows. And yet there is a tragedy in this perfection. They are trapped in their own design. They cannot learn, adapt, or grow beyond their initial parameters. They are frozen in time, just as Regice is frozen in its own ice, just as Regirock is a pile of stones that will never crumble into soil. They are monuments to a moment that has passed. When you stand before a Regi in the sealed chamber, you are not encountering a living creature. You are encountering a relic of a world that no longer exists, a ghost made of stone and memory. This brings us to the next layer of understanding. The Regi are not just golems. They are a map of human progress, carved into elemental forms. Each titan corresponds to an era of civilization. The Stone Age, the Ice Age, the Iron Age, the Age of Electricity, the Dark Ages. Their very existence is a commentary on how we as a species have advanced, and how each advance has come at a cost. The stone tools gave way to metal, metal gave way to machines, machines gave way to digital energy, and each stage left a mark on the world, just as each Regi left a mark on the regions they guarded. But what does it mean that the newest titans, Regice and Regidrago, represent the Age of Electricity and the Dark Ages? Why would Regice choose to create a dragon-headed titan that looks backward to an age of myth and superstition, while also forging a titan of pure voltage that looks forward to an age of endless power? Perhaps because progress is never linear. We do not simply march forward. We sometimes look back, we sometimes regress. The Regi capture that duality. As we move toward the next chapter, we will explore this metaphor in full. The Regi are not just ancient legendaries. They are a mirror held up to our own story as a civilization, and what in that mirror is both beautiful and troubling. For now, let the image of those beeping, immovable golems settle in your mind. They stand in their temples, waiting, programmed, eternal, and in their silence, they tell us something about ourselves that we may not be ready to hear. The metaphor of human progress is waiting, just beyond the next sealed door. But if the Regice are machines, built rather than born, programmed rather than grown, then we have to ask ourselves, what exactly is their program? What function were they built to serve? When you step back and look at the complete timeline of their materials, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. They are not merely a collection of random elemental beings thrown together by a lonely giant. They are a fossil record, a chronology etched into living stone, ice and metal. The history of the Regi Pokémon is in fact a perfect metaphorical mirror for the history of human civilization itself. Look at Regirock, the oldest of the original three, stone. The first thing humanity ever shaped into a tool, a wall, a home. The Stone Age, a time when survival was physical, raw and heavy. Regirock is the weight of that era, the foundational layer upon which everything else was built. It is the memory of the first spark of intelligence, the first time a hand picked up a rock and saw something more than debris. Then Regice, the Ice Age, a crucible for humanity, a test of will against the biting elements, the frozen ocean, the glaciers that carved continents. Regice is not just a block of cold. It is the memory of a world that forced humanity to adapt or die. It is the spirit of endurance, the relentless push to survive a climate that sought to erase everything. From that trial, humanity emerged with a new mastery. We learned to shape metal. Registeel represents the Iron Age, the forging of civilization itself. The sword, the plough, the bridge. Metal gave humanity control over its environment. In a way stone and ice never could. It was the engine of conquest, the material of empires. In the Hoenn mythology, this is the era when the Regice were said to be forged not by a god, but by human hands. Ancient alchemists and smiths, masters of the forge, created them as weapons for the legendary King Hoenn. They were tools of war in an age of iron. But civilization is never a straight line upward. History cycles into darkness. The Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, a period of myth, of dragon lore, of kings and knights, a time when the stories we told became powerful enough to shape our reality, to explain the unexplainable. This is Regirock, the unfinished dragon, the ambition that ran out of crystals before it could be completed. It represents the legends we build in the shadows of civilization, the potential that remains half-formed, the cautionary tale of a creator who ran out of material, and then the world changed again, faster than ever before. The age of electricity, the mastery of the atom, the harnessing of the invisible. Regirock is not a creature made of matter. It is a creature made of pure energy. This is humanity at its most advanced, manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe. The light bulb, the internet, the weapon that split the atom. Regirock is the power that drives the modern world. And it is volatile. It is power barely contained within a metallic shell. It represents our final, most ambitious leap from the physical into the abstract. From the first stone tool to the mastery of the atom and electricity. The Regice do not judge. They do not act. They simply exist as a record. They are a museum of our evolution. A timeline dragged from the deep earth all the way into the static of a high-voltage grid. They are the silent observers of humanity's rise and potential fall. They watched us climb the ladder of progress, rung by rung, and they stand at the top of that ladder, perfectly still, waiting. Regice created them for this purpose, to document the journey of intelligent life in its own image. Once the record was complete, once the timeline was drawn from raw stone to raw voltage, the purpose of the Titans was fulfilled. They sealed themselves away in the deepest caves, the coldest temples, the most remote chambers on Earth, not out of malice, not from the threat of an outside force, but because their function was archival. They were waiting, not for an ending, but for someone to read their story, to understand what they represent. Which brings us to the final mystery of the legendary Titans. What happens when the Watchers close their eyes? Where do the builders go when the monument is finished? This stillness, this perfect silence at the end of a long, long history of progress is where we must look next. A state of being so deep that it defies time itself. The legend of the Eternal Slumber. So civilization marched forward. Stone gave way to ice, ice to iron, iron to industry, and industry to the blinding flash of the modern age. We traced the Regice along this timeline, seeing them as tools, weapons, and milestones of human ingenuity. But every marathon ends in rest. Every great empire eventually grows quiet. Every tool, once its purpose is fulfilled, is put back on the shelf. And for the legendary Titans, their most profound and defining state is not the moment of their creation or the fury of their battles, but the deep, undisturbed peace of the slumber that follows. This is the core of the lore for sleep concept. The Regi Pokémon are not merely guardians of ancient vaults or weapons waiting to be aimed. They are the physical embodiment of absolute stillness. They are the silence after the Big Bang, the calm at the eye of the storm, the quiet moment between heartbeats. When you look at Regirock standing motionless in its desert cave for millennia, you are not looking at a monster waiting to attack. You are looking at a mountain learning to breathe slowly. You are looking at the patience of stone itself. These creatures represent the deepest meditation, the longest pause in the history of the world. To be a Regi is to understand that the greatest power is not always in movement, but in the sacred, deliberate choice to do nothing. Consider the architecture of their temples. In Hoenn, The halls of Regis are carved from permafrost. Wrapped in a blanket of ocean and stone, the silence down there is so complete you can hear the blood move in your own veins. Regis is not trapped in that frozen cavern. It is dreaming of the primordial ocean from which it was pulled, perfectly preserved in a single, eternal moment of winter. Regirock sits in a desert, so ancient its sand remembers the first meteor that hit the planet. It crumbles slightly at the edges, a slow dance with entropy, but it never truly erodes. Registeel lies in a rocky labyrinth, listening to the hum of the planet's core, rust forming like a slow breath. This is the peaceful nature of their long dormancy. The braille messages left for explorers are not warnings of a terrible danger. They are instructions for a polite awakening. To wake a Regi is to disturb a meditation that has lasted longer than most human civilizations. It is an intrusion of violence into a space of perfect peace. And this is the supreme paradox of the Eternal Slumber, the contrast between their destructive potential and their quiet existence. In their silence, these golems contain power that literally reshaped the planet. Regice pulled the continents into place, dragging landmasses like ropes of clay. Regis froze an entire ferocious ocean into submission. Yet in their temples, they do absolutely nothing. They are the slowest of all legendary Pokémon, and not because they are weak. They are slow because every movement they make requires the awakening of a god. Every step is a tectonic event. Their idle state is the ultimate expression of restraint and power. They could level a city with a single stomp, but they prefer to let the frost form on their crystalline bodies. They could melt a glacier, but they choose to let the centuries pass calmly. This is their grace. This is what separates them from beings of pure chaos. The Regice are ancient engines of creation that have learned the value of absolute peace. What does it mean to sleep for 10,000 years? Humans can barely grasp a century. We struggle with a single night of restless sleep. But for the Regice, deep time is their natural rhythm. Their slumber is not an unnatural seal imposed by a fearful king. Although that is part of the story in Hoenn, it is a geological necessity. Like a bear hibernating or a volcano resting, the Regi cycle of waking and sleeping is tied to the heartbeat of the world. When they sleep, they return to the earth. Regirock becomes indistinguishable from the desert. Registeel becomes an ore vein, waiting to be mined by the very civilization it represents. Regidrago sits in the crown tundra, a single crystallized eye closed, dreaming of the body it never had. It represents the end of an age, the story that was never finished. Regieleki hums with the potential of 1 billion lightning strikes, but it is bound to silence by the very temple that houses it. Pure energy frozen into a state of absolute stillness. Their sleep is the sleep of the builder, who finished their work and set down their hammer, or the artist who stepped back from the canvas. But the eternal slumber is never truly eternal. Nothing sleeps forever. And there is a reason these temples exist in the exact configurations they do. They are vaults, but they are also alarm clocks, waiting for the right hands to read the correct pattern of dots. The braille, read it. The cryptic patterns on the floor. The Regice are waiting for a purpose. They are waiting for a command. They are all waiting for the one who made them to return. Because deep beneath Snowpoint Temple, the master of the slumber is stirring in his own prison of ice. The giant who holds the ropes that bound the world together can feel the pull of an awakening. The weight of the continents he moved presses down on him. But even that weight cannot hold a creator forever. The silence of the eternal slumber is a fragile peace. It is a held breath. And when that breath is finally released, the ground will shake and the ice will crack. The seals that have held for millennia will shatter. What happens when the master wakes up and looks for his children? What happens when the stories of creation meet the reality of the modern world? That moment is closer than you think. The story of the seal that was never meant to last. The story of chapter 29, the master's return. We sat last time with the Regice in their eternal slumber, the image of them within those sealed chambers. Waiting, it sticks with you, a stillness so profound it feels sacred. But Within that stillness, there is always the potential for motion, the quiet before the avalanche. Regice does not sleep with the peace of the dead. It sleeps with the heavy breath of the hibernating bear. Its consciousness coiled deep within the earth of Snowpoint Temple or beneath the frost of the Crown Tundra. To wake something that old requires the correct key. Not a key of metal, but of flesh and stone and energy. The key is reunion. The modern era, as it so often does, dug its hands into the deep past and pulled the threads. The requirements for awakening Regice are absolute. It cannot be coaxed by mere technology. It cannot be bribed or summoned with simple prayers. It requires the presence of its entire family. Its 5 children must stand before it. Regirock, the foundation; Regice, the glacier; Registeel, the unyielding; Regice, the spark; Regidrago, the myth-made manifest. Only when this circle is complete does the ground begin its slow, deep groan. This is not a requirement of strength. It is a requirement of memory. Regice is the creator. These 5 are its hands, its eyes, its tools from the age of the primordial world. Without them, the master is blind and inert. When they are brought together, it is not simply a gathering of Pokémon. It is the reassembly of a god. The final battle takes place in the absolute depths of the temple. The air is cold and still. The carvings on the wall depict a time before human calendars. You descend. You place the children in their slots, or you bring them as offerings to the pillars. And then the silence breaks. The awakening of Regice is an event of geological proportions. The temple shakes. Ice cracks. The very air seems to solidify with pressure. The master stirs. It focuses on the one who brought its children home. Is it anger? Is it gratitude? Or is it simply the machine of the world starting its engine again after an eon of silence? The battle begins. Regice is slow to start, groggy from the sleep of ages. Its slow start ability represents this perfectly. But you know, watching it struggle at first, that when the shackles of time fully fall away, you will be facing the strength that moved continents. It is a fight against a living piece of geography, a creature that saw the world when it was still wet clay. The capture, if it comes, is a quiet moment. The great titan returns to its slumber within the tiny confines of a ball. But the significance of the event cannot be overstated. The master has returned. The children have found their way back. The cycle is complete. What happens next is the question that hangs in the air. The world has changed. The Titans are free, or at least relocated. What kind of world will they build or shape next? The impact of their reawakening ripples outward. We have buried ourselves in the deep past of these beings. We have watched them sleep. We have watched them wake. Now, it is time to look at the footprint they leave on the future. In the next chapter of this history, we step back and observe the shadow these titans cast across the universe, the pattern they weave, the story they tell about us. That is the chapter we must now turn to, the legacy of the titans. And so after all these years, the master awakens. Regice stirs from its ancient slumber only when its 5 children stand before it: Regirock, Regice, Registeel, Regice, and Regidrago. But what does it mean for the master to return? What legacy does it carry with it? The answer lies not in the present moment, but in the 2 competing stories that have shaped the Titan's existence since the beginning. One tale says the Regice are divine creations, born from the will of Arceus itself. In this version, Regice was an emissary sent to tame a wild newborn world. It shaped the continents with its bare hands, pulled landmasses apart like clay, and then forged its children from the raw elements of the earth: stone, ice, steel, lightning, and dragon energy. They were not built. They were willed into being, each one a reflection of the world's primal forces. This is the myth of divinity, where the Titans are sacred beings, carrying the breath of a creator god. But there is another story, one whispered in the ruins of Hoenn. It says the Regice were never divine at all. They were built by human hands, by ancient alchemists and smiths who discovered the secret to animating lifeless matter. These craftsmen did not pray to the heavens. They worked with metals, with crystals, with the very fabric of the earth. They forged golems in their own image, pouring their knowledge of the old world into each body. The Regice were weapons, tools of conquest for a king whose name has long been forgotten. This is the myth of alchemy, where creation is not an act of grace but of craft. Two truths and only one can be real, yet the evidence leaves us suspended between them. The Regice bear markings, those strange patterns of dots on their faces and bodies. In the games, these dots form the script of Braille, a language designed for human interaction. The sealed chamber in Hoenn speaks in Braille, and the puzzles to reach the Titans require human interpretation. That suggests a human origin. Why would a divine being communicate in a language invented by mortals? Unless the dots are not a message to humans, but from humans, a signature left by the alchemists who created them, a maker's mark, written in the only script that could survive the ages. But then consider the sheer scale of Regirock. It pulled continents. It froze oceans. No human hand could wield that power. The alchemists may have built the smaller titans, but Regi belongs to a different order entirely. Perhaps both myths are true, layered over each other like sediment. Perhaps Arceus created Regirock, and then humans, in their hubris, tried to replicate that creation, forging the others as pale imitations. Or perhaps the alchemists built the first Regice, and later, Regirock emerged from the earth itself, taking the form of the golems it found, adopting them as its own. The dots remain a mystery, unresolved and haunting. They stare out from every Regi face. 6 dots here, 7 there, a code we can read but cannot truly understand. They are the silent guardians of a secret that was never meant to be spoken aloud, and perhaps that is the true legacy of the Titans. Not that they are gods or machines, that they are boundaries. They mark the line between what we can know and what we must accept as unknowable. As they stand again, 5 children gathered around their master. They do not speak. They do not move. They simply wait, as they have always waited. The Regice are the silent guardians of the world's history, carrying within them the stories of creation and destruction, of divinity and alchemy, of faith and craft. And as long as they remain, sealed in their temples or wandering the frozen tundra, that history endures, not as a lesson, but as a quiet reminder that some truths are not meant to be solved, they are meant to be felt. And so, as you close your eyes and let the night settle around you, know that somewhere beneath the earth, beyond the reach of time, the Titans watch, not as judges, not as protectors, simply as witnesses. And their story, like your rest, is not an end. It is a pause, a deep breath before the next chapter begins. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.